success of it. Who can save mankind?
Hello, Los Angeles. This is Ted Boots at 107.5 HEPC LA. Today, we're sitting down with best-selling author Ryan Leone. Ryan has lived a fascinating life. He wrote his first novel, Wasting Talent, while serving a 5-year sentence in federal prison for being part of a Mexican drug cartel. Despite being an addict for nearly 2 decades, he has conquered adversity and become a household name. Ryan, we're just thrilled to have you on the show.
Well, Ted, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Now, you have multiple films, a documentary, and new book coming out next year. It seems like you're everywhere. I keep seeing you in magazines, and you're blowing up on YouTube. We all want to know, how'd you do it?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I essentially fabricated my past, told a bunch of bullshit stories on YouTube. Now I got a bunch of fucking morons believing every single word that I say. They're sending me copious amounts of money via GoFundMe. I even went into explicit detail about how I used to sell fake blotter acid as a scam when I was a junkie. And get this, Ted, now I got people paying $40 a pop for fake blotter acid. It's the American dream, bud. They actually believe that I've got some sort of small root beer barrel-sized dick. Truth of the matter is, Ted, I've got a great big pendulum swinging hammer cock. Let's just say the missus at home is a happy gal.
And why did you do it?
Well, Ted, it's a really long story, but if I'm going to be honest, initially I was in it for the bitches. I ended up impregnating one dumb drunk slut. We had a baby, we fell in love, now we're living in a shithole called West Covina, claiming LA.
Well, we have plenty of time, but before we get to the story, I want you to answer a question for all of Los Angeles. I've received a flurry of emails and calls, and everyone, including myself, is dying to know. Have you ever been butt-fucked so hard you've hallucinated?
Why? This album is dedicated to Karina and Nico Gatsby Leone. I love you guys with all my heart. And to my parents for never giving up on me. I also want to pay tribute and honor Paul Richard Harper and Nick Kempton. 2 guys that were brothers to me that we lost in 2019. You guys will always have a piece of my heart and inspire me to do better. I had relapsed in 2015 after being clean and sober for 3 years. Seems like I lost everything within the span of a week. I was engaged to a girl and we were getting set to get married. She took off. I lost the condo that we had been sharing in Encino, California, and she took her dog. And honestly, the biggest loss that I had was the fucking dog. People can be replaced, condos can be replaced. You can't replace a dog. I was still on federal probation at the time after serving 5 years in federal prison for what the Fed said was my participatory role in a big heroin conspiracy case. So I told my PO that I had relapsed and that I wanted to go to rehab. I voluntarily told him because I wanted to get better. I mean, I had just been sober for 3 years and I saw how much better my life was. I saw how much better my relationship was with my parents. I actually had like my first real relationship to this girl that had just left me. We were together for 2 years. And a lot of people that know me would look back and say that the period from 2013 to 2015 were the best couple years of my life. You know, and I had gotten sober a year before I got out of prison. After I'd gone to rehab, the next 6 months or so were pretty rocky. And to make a long story short, I basically met a girl. We ended up going AWOL and leaving the rehab together. We moved in with a transvestite down in San Diego. She stayed up for 10 days on crystal meth, took a swan dive out of a 3-story condo, got put into a psych ward, and then I basically turned myself into the psych ward. I was a federal fugitive at this point because I had run away from rehab. I went into the psych ward with like 8 grams of heroin stuffed into my asshole. And we shot dope as a bunch of mentally ill people stared at us catatonically and drooled. And for whatever reason, our relationship didn't work out. The worst thing that had happened with that short-lived relationship is that girl had taught me how to be an alcoholic. She saw me hustling, boosting stuff from stores every day just to sustain this very expensive heroin habit, and she was like a full-fledged alcoholic, and she said, "Why don't you be an alcoholic too?" So she started teaching me how to be an alcoholic. She said, "I will literally show you how to be an alcoholic." She started making me screwdrivers in the morning. Every time I went to the liquor store, she'd buy a 40-ounce malt liquor drink for me. And before I knew it, I was drinking every single day. So now I was a heroin addict and an alcoholic, and I'd gotten kicked out of more rehabs. I'd gotten kicked out of detox. Got to the point where my parents didn't want to help me get into rehabs anymore, so I moved in with my best friend. My first book, Wasting Talent, was still doing pretty well. I was still getting royalty checks, and my best friend was letting me live with him for free, so I was basically just using my royalty checks to shoot dope and drink all day. And around this time, I'd gotten a fan letter on Facebook. Some girl had written me. She was a single mom. She was living in Denver, and she told me that Wasting Talent was her favorite book. I had just sold the French rights to Wasting Talent, and I got a check for $6,000. So I ended up flying her out to Los Angeles, and we partied for a week. We got GHB, we got Molly, we got copious amounts of cocaine, went on a week-long bender, and we went up to Santa Barbara. We were at a bar at like 10:30 in the morning, and a bartender had seen us, this lady. And she said, "Oh my God, you guys make the most adorable couple. My husband totally officiates weddings. Why don't you guys get married?" And, I'm going to go ahead and blame it on the cocaine, but we seemed like it might be a good idea at the time. So we ended up going to City Hall. We got a marriage certificate, and we actually ended up getting married the next day. I'd only known this girl for a week. I was wearing a Dodgers hat and slippers. We went on the beach. We had no friends with us. And we got married, like for real, married on paper. She's still living in Denver because she had a kid, and she ends up moving out to California. We have this tumultuous relationship for about a year. I was doing heroin and drinking the entire time that we were married. The heroin, throughout the years, I've learned how to live a double life, and I've learned how to do it in secrecy. But with the drinking, I was drinking 2/5 of whiskey a day, and it was almost impossible to hide it from her. So she had left me for the first time in the summer of 2016. She had gone to stay with some family down in Orange County. I guess she had friends that lived out here. And she told me that unless I quit drinking, there's no way that she was going to come back. So I went and picked her up, and I promised her that I would stop. That night, when I picked her up, I hadn't drinking anything. I had just stopped cold turkey. This is after, like I said, drinking 2/5 of whiskey a day. And when I had stopped, I tried to go to sleep in our bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was flopping around like a fish. I was having a seizure because I was having DTs from the alcohol withdrawal. And in California, they stopped selling alcohol at 2 a.m. This is like maybe 3 or 4 in the morning. So we couldn't buy more alcohol. And I searched the room frantically for anything that I could find that had alcohol in it. I ended up drinking a bottle of cologne, and it actually got me well. It made me at least get to the morning. So in the morning, I went and I got a pint of Jack Daniels, and we had agreed that I was going to check into a rehab center in West LA. It was her son's 6th birthday, I think, and we had all agreed that we were going to go to Chuck E. Cheese, and then I was going to go to rehab. And I always had to come up with sleazy excuses to go out and get my heroin. She knew that I had gotten the pint of Jack Daniels and that I just needed that to be able to function that day. But she didn't know that I needed heroin. So my sleazy excuse for today was that I was going to go meet up with one of my friends who's a professional skateboarder, and he was going to give me a skateboard deck, and that's what I was going to give her, her kid for his birthday present. So I go out, I was living in North Hollywood. We had an apartment in North Hollywood, and I had to drive to a little city called Winnetka. I drive out to Winnetka, I drive all the way there, and my connection's this girl. And right when I get there, I say, "Okay, I'm here." I was going to pick up a gram or whatever I was getting. And she said, "Oh, I took off. I'm going to visit my boyfriend in jail. And I had to go. This is the only time I can go see him." So I'm livid. I'm dope sick too. I get back in the car and I'm rushing back. Now I'm not going to have dope. I'd missed my opportunity to get well. And I'm driving back. I'm having like a manic freak out right now. I'm like, punching the sunroof and screaming at myself. And my wife is texting me, "Where the fuck are you?" And so I'm going to text her back. I'm going about 60 miles per hour on the 101 freeway. And I'm, saying whatever bullshit excuse why I'm late. And I look up and all of a sudden the traffic has stopped in front of me. I slam on my brakes and I hit this Honda that's in front of me. I'm driving an X5 BMW, one of the SUV BMWs. So my car hits this Honda. As soon as I hit him, he hits the car ahead of us. So I pretty much accordion this Honda, that's in the middle of us. And he's like this Middle Eastern guy. My car barely gets damaged, and the car in front of his was like a minivan. That car barely gets damaged. So I park on the side of the freeway, and I noticed that the guy, not in the car ahead of me, but the car that he had hit that's ahead of us, is like some big old Southsider. It's a bomb ass in the fool, one of those kind of guys. And so he's all pissed off, he's got the classic like bald head that's all shiny. He's got like 7 kids in the car with him. And he gets out and he's like, "What the fuck, bro? What's up, fool? What the fuck happened, dog?" Now, just a little, let me interrupt for a second to bring you a quick fashion report, just so you know what I was looking at this exact moment. I'm wearing board shorts. I'm not wearing a shirt. I have a backwards hat. I'm covered in track marks. I'm wearing flip-flops, and I have the same athlete's foot that I've had for the last 15 years because I've been to so many jails and rehabs that this strain is like mutated and it's like visible from where I'm wearing flip-flops. In short, I look like a total dirtbag. And so I tell this Mexican, this Southsider guy, I tell the Mexican dude, I go, hey man, somebody like rear-ended me. There's no damage on the back of my car. So he looks at me, he's like, "Why you fucking lying, fool?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm not lying. I mean, somebody hit the back of my car and it made me slam on my brakes, and that's why I hit him." My story made no sense. And his 400-pound girlfriend's like, "Hey, Papi, get back in the car. It's not worth it, eh?" And I'm just like, yeah, Papi, get back in the car. And he just looks at me, he's like, "You better not be fucking drunk, fool. I got fucking kids in the car." I was like, "Dude, you have an entire daycare in the car." He's like, "What's that supposed to mean, fool?" And I mean, that's like what I really said. And then, his girl came and got him back in the car. And I went and I sat in my car and I waited for the California Highway Patrol officer to get there. And he came and he interviewed the first family, the one in the minivan, for like 5 or 10 minutes. He took notes and then they took off. They hardly had any damage. And then he was talking to the Middle Eastern guy in the middle. And that guy's car was totaled. I mean, it was like accordioned. It was smoking. And I'm sitting there, I didn't even realize that I had a spoon in my pocket. I had a couple used syringes, carbon burn on the bottom of the spoon, probably like some crusty cotton attached to it. And it was just sitting in my pocket of my board shorts. And so he's talking to the Middle Eastern guy for another 10 minutes. Then he gets to me. And I'm sitting in my car and he asks me to get out of the car. I get out and first thing he says to me is, "How much have you had to drink?" And I said, "Nothing. What do you mean?" And he goes, "Sir, how much have you had to drink?" So I told him that I'd been drinking the night before, but that I didn't have anything to drink this morning. So he asked me to do a field sobriety test. I do it. And, of course, in my mind, I feel like I passed it. I mean, I have debilitating ADD, so that kind of stuff's hard for me to do anyway. And I'm also dope sick. So, I'm not feeling the most coordinated anyway. I'm just really not feeling well. Do the field sobriety test, and then he asked me to do, to blow in the breathalyzer. And at first I say that I don't want to. And he says, "Well, if you refuse the breathalyzer, I'm just going to take you to jail automatically." So eventually I decide to just do it. And I tell him, I go, "Okay, I had a couple mimosas, with my wife for breakfast, just to be honest with you. But I'm pretty sure that I'm within the legal parameters right now where, I'm still driving legally." So I blow in the breathalyzer. And as I'm doing that, another CHP car pulls up. And now, general rule of thumb, when a secondary police car pulls up in a situation like this, you are going to fucking jail. So I blow into the breathalyzer, and you blow until it clicks. So I blow, and then it clicks. And I say, well, what is it? And he says, well, we can't tell you until you do it for a second time because it has to be, verified by a secondary test. So I blow into it again. There's all this anticipation, blow for like 15 seconds. There's the click. Now there's another CHP officer. They're both kind of looking at it. And so I say, so what did I blow? And the other CHP officer that had pulled up, he said, you blew a .06. Now in California, the legal limit is a .08. So I'm almost like emotional in triumph. I'm like, oh my God, I wanted to hug the guys. I'm like, thank God. I know I do have a problem with alcohol. I'm not drinking and driving right now, but I was really worried I wasn't going to be able to go to Chuck E. Cheese with my stepkid today. And he goes, well, you still might be able to go after you get out of jail. And I said, what? He says, put your fucking hands behind your back. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're going to jail. I said, for what? He said, for driving under the influence. And so I cuff up. He goes, hey, do you have anything in the pockets? I'm like, got a couple syringes and a spoon. And he takes that out. He puts it on the hood of my head. She kind of shakes his head in disgust. And I go to jail. Now, they let me out maybe 7-8 hours later whenever I'm sobered up. And when I had gone to the police station, they make you do another breathalyzer test, but this one's in a much bigger, kind of machine thing. And I blew a .02. So, clearly I didn't get a DUI. And I was talking shit to the cop. I'm like, look, man, I'm going to take this to trial if I have to. I'm going to beat this. And he's just kind of being arrogant with me. Yeah, whatever. So I get out of jail, that night, and the next day I call my federal PO, and I say, hey, I got in a car accident, yesterday, and I got charged with a DUI. I kind of just threw it in there. And he's like, what? And I go, yeah, I got charged with a DUI, but look, I wasn't drunk. He goes, well, did you drink anything? And I said, well, yeah. I had to admit to him that I had because I had admitted in the police report that I had drinking mimosas. So the PO says that it doesn't matter if I beat the case in the state. If I go to court and they throw it out that he's still going to violate me, in his exact words, you are going to prison and I'm going to recommend a year. Because they were upset with me because of when I went to the psych ward when I was a federal fugitive. My whole plan to go to the psych ward, on top of smuggling my girl in the heroin, I knew that by confidentiality laws and the way that it works in the psychiatric community that they don't have to disclose when I was admitted. I could just get a paperwork with the discharge date. So I was able to be a fugitive and kind of do what I want for a few months. And then I went and turned myself into the psych ward for a couple weeks. And when I got out, I had the discharge paperwork. So, for all they knew, I was in there the whole time. But the thing is they knew that I was running game on them. They knew that I was getting over on them. And from that point forward, they were very vindictive and they were trying to get me for whatever. And now they actually got me for something. And sure enough, I'd gone to court on the state level and it was a DA reject. The DA didn't even file the case on me. So the DUI got thrown out in the state. But because I was on federal probation, now I had to go to court for a federal probation hearing. And I knew that I was going back to prison.
This call is from a federal prison.
I have a collect call from
Tom.
If you would like to accept this call, please press 4.
Jesus Christ, Tom. I don't know how many times I have to tell you not to call me, dude. I don't know how you keep getting my phone number, but right now I'm recording an album. You're literally interrupting my work, bro. I'm doing my first album. You're interrupting me. I'm sure everybody wants to know. What's so important, Tom? What's so important that you're fucking interrupting me right now?
I may need $17 to treat myself to a punk with a dandy ass.
Jesus Christ, Tom. This is exactly why I don't want you calling me, because you always say this weird shit. You need $17 for a punk with a dandy ass or whatever weird shit you said. How the fuck did you even get my phone number, Tom?
I may have gotten your phone number from a Negro named Morgan Freeman.
Oh my God, dude. You can't call black people Negros, Tom. I know you've been locked up since, before the civil rights movement. You've been in prison since the fucking 60s, but you can't call people Negros like that. And Morgan Freeman, the actor, dude, I don't even know Morgan Freeman, and more importantly, you don't know him. You know what? No. I'm sure everybody is dying to know this. How do you know Morgan Freeman, Tom?
I may have worked as a stagehand just west of Wichita.
All right, Tom, goodbye. Goodbye. Don't call me again. No punks with dandy asses, no weird stagehand shit, no Wichita, dude. Don't call me again, bro. You're a weirdo. You're a rapist. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. I knew that I was going to go back to federal prison. My PO was insisting that. I'd gotten arrested for the DUI in the summer of 2016, and my PO was recommending that I do a year. I had gotten a dirty drug test for an opiate, and then I went to the doctor and I cut my foot open on purpose with a knife, and I got prescribed Vicodin. Even though my PO told me that they were going to send it to the lab and discern between prescription opioids and illicit opiates, I knew that they were just bluffing because those tests are incredibly expensive. So basically, I was prescribed Vicodin, I was shooting heroin and getting away with my drug addiction. My PO knew that I was strung out like a lab rat, and he was fucking pissed. He wanted me to go back to prison. My drug addiction and my alcoholism kept progressing because I knew that going back to prison was inevitable. It was looming ahead of me. It was the worst fucking feeling in the world. I've explained it to other people. It almost felt like a breakup. I'd wake up every morning and I'd feel empty inside. My marriage was a complete joke. My wife hated me. And I had gotten up to the point where I was shooting 3 grams of heroin a day and I was drinking 2 fists of whiskey. I finally went for sentencing in December. And my PO was fighting for me to get a year in prison. My attorney was asking that I get some sort of rehabilitation, whether that be rehab or outpatient, anything but me going actually back to prison. Because the argument was that I had an apartment in North Hollywood, I had a car, I had a wife, I had a stepkid, and I was providing for them. So me going back to prison would be a great disservice to myself and my family. Judge wasn't really buying that. He sentenced me to 90 days in federal prison. In the federal system, when you get sentenced to 90 days, anything under a year, you do 100% of your sentence. Anything over a year, you do about 87% of your sentence. But because I was doing under a year, gave me 90 days and I had to do 100%. And I had pleaded to the judge and I had said, listen, if you send me to prison, I'm going to lose every single thing that I have. I'm going to lose my apartment. My marriage is holding on by a thread. I didn't say that. I think I said that she had health problems because she had had an aneurysm from smoking meth. I didn't tell him that either. But she really was having health problems. She really did have an aneurysm from smoking meth. But, I basically said she'd been hospitalized and I needed to provide. He didn't care. He said, you're going back to prison for 90 days because I needed a wake-up call. And I asked him, since the holidays were coming up and since I had just gotten married and it was my first year with my wife and my stepkid, if I could turn myself in after the holidays, and he said that would be okay. So I was supposed to turn myself in on January 6th. So then I had another month where I was just running a complete muck. Now I was shooting about 4 or 5 grams of heroin a day. I'm going down to Skid Row, 6th and San Pedro. I was hanging out on Town Street, on San Julian. I was buying what they called footballs, these little balloons that look like rat turds of heroin. And I was drinking 2 fists of whiskey a day. Until finally I was supposed to turn myself in on the 6th. Might have been the 6th or the 7th. Whatever the case, I turned myself in a day late. And when I was doing the initial medical intake, when I turned myself in, they took one look at me and they knew that I had to be hospitalized. That's how bad a shape I was in. My face was just covered in scabs that I'd picked. I was actually, shooting a lot of cocaine. Forgot to mention that. But my wife and I were shooting cocaine, smoking crack. I'm shooting heroin. I'm drinking 2 fists of whiskey a day. Sometimes when I went downtown, I'd buy PCP if I had some extra dollars after I scored. So they took me to a hospital called White Memorial Hospital in East LA. And I was chained to a bed with 2 armed U.S. Marshals pretty much watching me detoxing. I detoxed for a week. I watched Trump get inaugurated, and it seemed nightmarish at the time, that it wasn't reality. Coming off alcohol was one of the worst things that I ever had to endure. Even though they were giving me medications, in the beginning I did get some hallucinations. I was seeing bugs crawling all over the ceilings. And on top of that, I was kicking a really nasty heroin habit. I was in the hospital for about a week. Then they discharged me. I went to MDC Los Angeles, which is like a federal detention center. And then they shipped me to USP Lompoc, where I ran into Big Meech. This is January of 2017. Big Meech was in the same unit as me. I was actually only on the yard for a couple weeks, and then I was doing heroin there, and I got tested, and I went to the hole for a dirty drug test. And I spent the last 6 or 7 weeks of my sentence in solitary confinement. And I pretty much got a Dear John letter from my wife. She said she was leaving me. Sure enough, wasn't going to be paying the rent for me anymore, so I was losing my apartment in North Hollywood. I didn't have a car to come back to, and she was taking her kid and going back to Denver. You know, basically everything that I had predicted and told the judge. I got out in March of 2017, my second time in federal prison, and I'd gotten released directly from solitary confinement. My parents had written me letters while I was at Lompoc, and they had said that I could come back and get on my feet and stay with them in Santa Barbara, the town that I grew up in. So that day I got out, and I went to my parents' house. I went out for a nice steak dinner with my dad. Went to my best friend Jeff's house. He gave me a little piece of Suboxone. I put it in a spoon, added a little water, put it in my nose. Calito is what it's called in prison. That's how you do heroin. You can also do Suboxone that way. So I got loaded. I mean, yeah, we don't have a tolerance to opiates, and you do a little piece of a Suboxone, you get loaded like you're doing heroin. I went out to a nightclub. I got wasted. And I ended up getting laid that night. And I woke up the next morning in my best friend's roommate's bed with some girl that I had brought home from the nightclub. And it was just a very stark contrast from where I was the night before. I was just in solitary confinement fucking talking to myself, imagining scenarios like this. And now I got some naked girl in bed next to me. While I was in federal prison the second time, I started writing my second novel, June Gloom. And that book basically juxtaposes 3 of the last relationships that I was in. My fiance, the one that had left me when I relapsed in 2015, then the girl that I dated that I AWOL'd from rehab, and then my wife. And those 3 relationships that I had that were seething with toxicity, and what the common thread was between all 3 of those relationships is that I was the sicko, that prison PTSD and underlying mental health issues and my addiction had affected all 3 of those relationships. And I figured that it would be a good novel if I fictionalized it and put all these relationships in sequential order so that they could be examined, you know, somewhat just to help me kind of process them. During the course of writing June Gloom, I realized that I still might have feelings for my fiance, the one that had left me in 2015. And I called her and I basically poured my heart out to her. And she ended up flying back, and we got back together for a few days, and then I abruptly broke up with her. But that's a story for a whole different time. I was living at my parents' house, and I was basically trying to do anything I could to hustle up money. I didn't have a car anymore, and I was basically just stuck there. I wasn't talking to my ex-wife, and I was mad at myself for relapsing. You know, I looked back on my life. My life was drama-free from when I got out of federal prison the first time in 2013 to when I relapsed in 2015. I was actually happy during that period, and I was desperately trying to get back there. So I started working for like a moving company, helping move furniture, and I was just trying to save up money so I could get my own place. One thing that I started doing was going to AA meetings because I was really trying to change. I didn't want this to happen to me again. Even though I was kind of dabbling in Suboxone, you know, I was getting them off my friend and I was getting high here and there, not every day at this point. But I did want to change. So I started going to AA meetings, and I met a girl at an AA meeting. She was probably like 22 years old, and we had a platonic relationship. She told me that she needed a sober person to hang out with. And she asked me if I wanted to go to the beach with her the next day. So I said that I would. I went with her to the beach the next day, and we were laying out on the sand. We were kind of both just tanning. And she told me that she was working as an escort, you know, as a prostitute. And she was like 22 years old, and she had told me that she already had a felony for just a simple drug possession, and it was almost impossible for her to find normal work. You know, every time she would apply for a job, they would say, "You're so young and you already have a felony," and it would go against her. So she was turning tricks, and she was meeting up with guys off back pages, and she said she was getting into some really bad situations. You know, she had been raped, she had been robbed, and I suggested that maybe she do some webcam porn. I knew about the website Chatterbait. She asked me what that meant, and I said, well, I don't know. I heard, you know, I have friends that pretty much just have sex on this interactive, you know, chat room website, and I heard you can make like $2,000 a day. And she was interested in doing it. And I said that I would do it with her. And I said, I need money too. So she was living in a sober living. I was living at my parents' house. And I showed up at my best friend Jeff's house with her. And I said, hey, I need to go up into your roommate's room. He was like at work. And I need to fuck this girl. And I need to film. And I'll give you $100. And he's like, sure, for $100, that's cool. Give me the $100. I was like, well, I don't have it now. I'll give it to you after I get paid. And he kind of just gave me that look because he knows me and knows that I'm a bullshit artist. He let me go up into the room. We had sex. We filmed it. And we tried to upload it, and we couldn't figure out how to do it. You know, it was like we couldn't do it from a phone. You had to do it from a laptop, and we were using an iPhone. So that didn't work. It was like a botched attempt. And I had my shirt off, and I walked her outside of his apartment, and this group of girls had picked her up. They were like in a Jeep. There were a bunch of girls her age, and they asked what we were doing, and she said that we just got done having sex, and that we were trying to upload on the internet to make money. Now, these girls said that they wanted to do it too. So this light bulb went off in my head. There were all these young girls that she was living at the sober living house with, and I was like, whoa, we could make like a porn company, and I can probably get out of my financial woes this way. So we didn't have a place to film, and I had to start recruiting other guys. So I found this other guy. He was probably like 23 years old. I'd been friends with him for a while, and I asked him if he wanted to do this. I said, I got like 5 girls that are willing to have sex on camera with us, and we can make a bunch of money. So he said that he wanted to do it, and he had an apartment that we could go film it at. So the day that we're supposed to film, he calls me in a panic, and he says, hey man, I need heroin. I can't get it up, and I can't stay hard for a long time unless I'm high on heroin. Can you get anything? Now, I was pretty much sober at the time, except for the Suboxone that I was dabbling in, but I called one of my connections, and I did the favor for him. I met up with this guy that I'd known for years. His name was Charlie Becchio. And he's like this older Peckerwood guy. He's maybe like 5 or 6 years older than me. And I'd met him when I was going to Santa Barbara County Jail when I was a lot younger. And I'm getting the heroin from him. And he asked me what I'm doing. And I said, hey, I'm trying to start this porn company. I got like these 5 girls in their early 20s. Would you be interested in making videos with those? And he says, nah, but are any of those girls working as escorts? And I asked him why. I was like, yeah, well, one of them is, but I'm trying to get her out of that profession. He said that he was driving Uber on the side, and that he had one of his regular customers that was kind of a square in an unhappy marriage, and he was looking for kind of like a sugar daddy situation, something safe, because he was in this unhappy marriage, and he just wanted like some hot girl that was younger that he could kind of sleep with without the chance of him getting caught by his wife. And he asked me if I could hook it up with this girl that I knew. And I said, I don't know, let me ask her. So I asked her, and she said, yeah, absolutely. She was going to be short on rent, and the whole webcam porn thing hadn't really materialized yet. So Charlie gave the guy my phone number, and the guy called me, and his name was Ryan as well. And he said, hey, can you send me naked pictures of this girl? So I texted her. I said, hey, send me naked pictures of you. Sent them to him. He said, yeah, she's cute. He explained the same thing that Charlie had told me, that he was in an unhappy marriage and he just wanted something safe. He had been burned off back pages himself, he had told me. So I set it up for noon on a Friday. They were going to meet at some hotel. And that day, I happened to be going to my elementary school. They were unveiling some time capsule that we had put in there in like 1991. And I saw a bunch of my old friends that I had gone to elementary school with, and I'm at this like cocktail reception with them. And the whole plan was never for me to go to the motel with this girl, but she ended up calling me and she said, hey, would you mind going with me to meet up with this guy? I just want to make sure he's not a weirdo, and I want him to see you so that he doesn't try anything crazy or doesn't get violent with me. So I said, okay. And so I took an Uber to the motel, and I remember it was very foreboding. There was no cars in the parking lot. There were kind of leaves ominously blowing by. It just seemed like, I don't know, there was a weird energy there. And she was in little stilettos and a short skirt, looked like a fucking whore. And I said, okay, let's go. And we go up to the room. It was like on the 2nd floor. We knock on the door, and 6 sheriffs just pop out. They're in the room. Get on the ground, Santa Barbara Narcotics Department. And she just looks at me and she's like, are you serious? And I look at her like, are you serious? Like, we didn't know. I didn't know if she had set me up. She didn't know if I had set her up. And, they had cuffed us, and they separated us, and they both asked us questions separately about what we were doing at this motel on this particular day and what the arrangement was supposed to be. And she had told them, they asked her who I was, and she said that I was her friend. I had just gotten out of prison, and she was trying to make money to help me out so that I could get back on my feet, which is like the worst thing she could have fucking said. And they arrested me, and they charged me with pimping and pandering. So they didn't end up arresting the girl. They let her go because really she didn't commit a crime. I'm the only one that actually did anything. I attempted to broker a prostitution deal, and I guess that's considered pimping and pandering. They took me to the police station and to do an interrogation. Now, my general rule of thumb with police is that I don't give them any statements because it can be used against you. I had made that mistake when I was younger in Florida when I had gotten arrested with 2 bags of heroin. They asked me what I was doing with 2 different bags, and I said I was going to sell one so I could do the other one for free. They ended up charging me with possession with intent to sell. So from that point forward, I rarely ever made statements to police. And I had learned my lesson when I got arrested for the DUI, and I had told my federal PO that I'd been arrested. There's no system set in place where if you get arrested on the state level, they notify the feds. So there's no point to tell them. So my problem was that my federal PO could figure out that I was in jail if he tried to contact me and I was nowhere to be found. And at that point, he might look into it and figure out that I actually am in jail. So I had to figure out a way to buy some time. And what my plan was is that I would tell the detective when he interrogated me that I would flip for him, that I'd become an informant or give him some sort of information as long as they let me go. That way I could buy some time. I wasn't really going to cooperate. So he interrogated me and asked me what I was doing pimping out a girl. And I said, hey, I'm not really a pimp. I was just trying to do a favor for somebody. And he asked me who Charlie Vecchio was. I didn't know that Charlie was the informant at the time, so I said that I hardly knew Charlie Vecchio. And then I said, hey, is this workable? Can I become an informant for you? And he said that it was. And then he gave me a cell phone. He said, try to buy a pound of meth or heroin. And I told him that I had just gotten out of prison and that it would take me a little bit of time to try to figure out somebody to set up. And if he gave me his phone number and just let me go right now, that I'd be in touch with him and that we could figure it out. He didn't buy that, and I ended up going back to jail. So I go to jail, and I called my dad, and I told my dad what happened. I said, hey, Dad, I've been arrested for pimping and pandering. And he said, what the fuck? I mean, of all charges, pimping and pandering, that's like some crazy retro 70s fucking charge. I was like the only white person in Santa Barbara County history to ever be charged with pimping and pandering. It was generally a black person charge. I mean, not to sound racist, but it's the truth. It's a stereotypical black guy charge. And even the COs, when I got to jail, were making fun of me. So my dad ended up bailing me out. It was like $25,000, so I think he had to put up $2,500 for me to get out. I get out, and the next day I'm just can't believe that this has happened to me. I just got out of prison, and now I'm looking at another charge. I didn't think that I was in as much trouble as I actually was, and I ended up calling a few attorneys, and I started talking to this guy named Adam Perlman. Adam told me that I was looking at 3 years mandatory minimum state prison sentence. And I couldn't believe that. 3 years. Now in the state, you only do half time. So, you do 18 months on 3 years. But still, the whole thing was just making me feel sick to my stomach. I could not believe that I just got out of prison and now I caught another charge. That afternoon, I had to go to court-ordered therapy because the feds make you go to therapy a couple times a month, and it was my first time meeting with this woman. So I met with her, and I had a lot on my mind because I was really upset that I just caught this case. And she asked me, she said, hey, it looks like something's troubling you. Do you want to talk about it? And I said, I do want to talk about it, but I'm scared that anything I tell you, you're going to relay back to my PO, and I don't want to get in trouble for what I say. And she said, listen, I'm bound by confidentiality laws. Unless you're a danger to yourself or to the community, then you can tell me anything you want, and I'm not going to relay it to the PO. And I was really in a point in my life where I did want to change. That's why I went to the AA meeting in the first place, where I met the alleged prostitute. And I felt like being honest with her just to get a load off my chest. So I told her, and I said, listen, this is what happened. I kind of jumped in the middle of a prostitution deal. It was an undercover sting operation. And I got charged with pimping and pandering, and now I'm looking at 3 years in state prison. And if the federal PO finds out about it, I'll get a violation on top of that. And violations can be pretty lengthy. I mean, we're talking about I could get like up to 3 or 4 years as a violation. And so we kind of processed this, and it felt good. And I finished my therapy session, and my dad picked me up, and I went back home. I got a call from the therapist about an hour later, and she said, Ryan, I'm just an intern here. I'm not actually a therapist. And I checked with my boss, and we actually do have to notify your PO that you caught a new criminal charge. And you can do it yourself, but you have until noon tomorrow. We're going to tell them for you. And I said, are you serious? You coerced me. You fucking tricked me into telling you that I did this, even though I told you I didn't want to tell you because you could end up telling my PO. She said, now, Ryan, please calm down. I'm like, no, fuck you. You know, I would have gotten away. My whole plan was, now that I was out on bail, was to keep pushing this back. I was getting off federal probation in December, and just keep pushing the state case back until I'm off probation. So then I'm only dealing with the state case. State cases are much easier to win than federal violations. Federal violation, I'm going back to prison for sure. So, I mean, I was livid. I was irate, and it really compromised therapeutic integrity from this point forward. I don't think I can ever trust a therapist again, you know, after she had tricked me. I mean, it felt like it was malicious intent with what she had done to me. So I called my PO the next day, and I kind of faked crying, and I said, hey, man, I got arrested, and I was in a bad situation, and I accidentally pimped a bitch out. No, I didn't really say it like that. But I did tell him what happened, and he didn't realize that, you know, the reason that I was telling him is because the intern or the therapist, whatever she was, had pretty much forced me to admit it to him. So he thought that I was volunteering the information to him. So he told me that he would allow the case to resolve itself in the state, and then he would pursue a federal violation after that point. And he said that if I was convicted, that he would have to go after some sort of federal probation violation. And just considering the fact that I'd gotten 3 months for a non-conviction DUI, I was really worried about how this whole thing was going to get resolved. And I started drinking again. You know, I went right back to the level of drinking that I was doing right before I'd gone to prison. I mean, I went right back to drinking about 2 fifths of whiskey a day, and I got prescribed Suboxone, and I started shooting them. You can shoot Suboxone and you don't get a rush or anything, but I think I'm more addicted to the needle than anything else. Basically, I was prescribed 8 milligram strips. I was prescribed 3 of them a day. What I would do is I would get one of the strips, I would put it in a spoon, just add a little water to it, and it liquefies. You can stir it up with the plunger, throw a little cotton in the spoon, you drop the shot, and you inject it. You don't get a rush, but, you know, you feel it instantly. And I'm addicted to shooting Suboxone, and when you combine that with drinking 2 fifths of whiskey a day, I'm going around being all fucked up. Now, around this time, I got a message on Facebook from a girl named Karina. When I was in prison the first time, when I'd gone in, it was MySpace. Facebook wasn't even that popular when I'd gone to prison in 2009. But while I was away, Facebook had kind of been catapulted to popularity, and everybody started being on Facebook. So I had a couple of my friends running my Facebook for me, and I told them, I said, hey, add every hot girl that you see as a friend so that when I get out of prison, I have like a database of like a bunch of hot girls. And one of the girls that they had added was this girl, Karina. You know, she was from Santa Barbara, a year older than me, really pretty Hispanic girl. And when I got out in 2013, I was running kind of like the same bullshit line on every hot girl on my Facebook. I would private message them and I would say, hey, do I know you through so-and-so? And I'd look at who our mutual friends are. Hey, do I know you through Sammy? And some girls would know that I was bullshitting them, and they wouldn't talk to me. Some girls would know that I was bullshitting them, but they wanted to talk to me, so they'd message me back. And then some girls would actually get confused and be like, I don't think so. And I don't remember what category Karina was in, but I know that she had a boyfriend at the time, and she told me that much. She said, hey, I have a boyfriend, and I'm not really interested in doing anything with you, or whatever, because I was hitting on her. So fast forward, now it's 2017. And she actually messaged me. Now, I'm one of those people that's very public with all my relationships on Facebook. You know, the ups and the downs. You know, I get all lovey-dovey and I'll post all sorts of this crazy, annoying, nauseating, faggy, love-drunk shit. And I also, when I break up or whatever, I put that on Facebook as well. And she had messaged me and she said, hey, you're always dating all these bimbos, and now I'm finally single, and I see that you're single. Why don't you take me out to dinner? Now, at the time, I'm back into the throes of alcoholism, but I'm going over to my best friend Jeff's house every day, and we're eating organic food, and we're working out. And I'm in reasonably good shape. I had been working out the whole 3 months that I was away, and every day when he got off work, I'd go over to his place, and we'd work out, and, you know, we'd grill good food. You know, we'd eat steaks, we were eating salmon, bunch of organic stuff, paleo. So even though I was drinking a lot and I was shooting Suboxone, I was eating well and I was working out. And one day, I remember I didn't have a car at the time. My mom would have to take me to Jeff's. So one day she was going to take me up to Jeff's house and I said, why don't you take me downtown? Karina worked at a hair salon place. Now we hadn't made any plans or anything. And I just was going to show up at her salon and take her out to dinner, even though I only had $20 in my pocket. Now, when she had asked me if sometime I'd take her out to dinner, I said, well, you might want to call me. And she had called me, and I had said, yeah, I'm down to take you out to dinner, but there's something you should know. I recently got arrested, and I'm on federal probation, and there's a good chance that I'm going back to prison. And she said, well, what did you get arrested for? And I said, just pimping and pandering. And she was like, what? And I was like, well, it's kind of a misunderstanding. I didn't really do it. And she's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And she had asked me, she said, hey, are you sober? Because along with posting, you know, all my love life stuff on Facebook, I'm one of those people that posts about my sobriety. Like, hey, I have 4 days sober, or, oh, I relapsed, or, you know, when I had a year sober, I had posted that. So she knew that I went back and forth with recovery, and she had asked me if I was sober, and I said that I was. And I said, why, are you? I didn't even know that she had any history with drugs or alcohol, and she said that she was a recovering alcoholic, but that she was in fact, currently in recovery. So this night, I showed up at her salon completely unexpected, and I had my big red backpack on, and I was wearing a wife beater, and I was wearing shorts, and I looked like totally trashy. This is a high-end salon, and I saw her working at the front. She looked completely beautiful. I remember she was wearing a black dress, and she looked stunning. And she saw me, and she's just like, hey, what are you doing here? And I said, hey, I was in the neighborhood, and, you know, I thought maybe I could take you up on that dinner thing that you had asked me about. Can we go out to dinner tonight? And she said that she had to close the salon, but that, yeah, she was down to go to dinner that night. And she introduced me to her boss. She worked for a place called Walter Claudio, and he's kind of like one of the most well-known hairstylists in town. And I met him, and he didn't like me right off the bat, you know, probably because I look like a scumbag. Here I am, I'm all tan and muscular, and I'm wearing this big red backpack with stains on it because I'd bought it off a homeless guy. And, you know, he had even told her that he didn't like me. So anyway, I had to wait. I had to like kill an hour for her to get off work. And I just like smoked cigarettes outside. And then finally it was time for her to shut down. She comes outside and she says, where do you want to go out for dinner? And I said, I don't know, it's up to you. And she said, well, I got this really great place. And we can go up there. They have steak bites. That's one of my favorite things to eat, she said. So we walked up to this restaurant. And as we were walking, she said, hey, are you really sober? And I had already been drinking that day. I had a fifth of whiskey in my backpack. And I said, well, and she said, good, because I like to have a glass of wine with dinner, and I didn't know if you were like completely sober or not. I said, no, that's cool. So we go to this place, we get steak bites, and I start getting Jack and Coke doubles. That was my drink at the time. And I told her, I said, hey, I only have $20. I left my wallet at home, or I gave her some bullshit story. She said that's fine, that she would cover it. We have a bunch of drinks. I probably had like 4 or 5 Jack and Coke doubles that she was paying for, and I'd already been drinking all day anyway. So now she's a little tipsy herself. She asked if I want to go to another place to get dinner because there's a place up the street that she'd rather go to. And we start walking up there. Now, she starts getting touchy-feely with me. You know, she's like leaning into me, and she's like, you know, linking her arm with my arm. And I already knew that she was being affectionate with me, that I was definitely going to fuck her that night. So we get to this restaurant, we sit at the table, and I can tell she's tipsy. She leans into me and she goes, you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. And right when she says that, I lean in to kiss her. And she just pushes me off of her, and she's like, whoa. I don't even know you like that. Rejected me. It was completely awkward. We sat there in silence for about 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she breaks the silence and says,
this is embarrassing, but can we go back to the salon and bang?
And we immediately got the check. And we went back to the salon. And I sat in Walter's swivel chair. And she rode me. And I fucked the shit out of her. And I got the last laugh. So fuck you, Walter. I fucked Karina in your chair. And that's how I met Karina Franco. Hey, do you ever think about bomb-ass tan dudes when you're fucking your hyena, baby Scrappy? Damn, Karina, you like bro chop porn?
Of course I like bro chop porn. It's bomb.
Hey, you take that ecstasy that white boy gave us, fool? Yeah. Hey, I'm starting to feel a little bomb, fool. You feel bomb too? Kind of. As bomb as that time that we were stoned on methamphetamine? Kind of. Hey, sometimes I like it when my baby mama sticks her finger up my ass when we're having sex, fool. Feels fucking bomb, dog. Sometimes I like it when she puts her thumb on my ass too, fool. But she thinks that I'm gay or something, dog. You don't think that I'm gay, do you, fool? Kind of. Hey, who cares what she thinks? My Ina's fat anyway, fool. Hey, fool. I'm really starting to feel that shit right now, dog. Do you think it's possible to feel too bomb? Kind of. Oh, yeah. Yeah, papi. Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah, papi. Oh, yeah. Oh. 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 Hey, call me Lucas. Why? Because I want to feel like a white boy and feel crazy. Hey, dog, no eye contact. Oh, Lucas. Lucas. I love you, pero you're fucking disgusting, queer. After I fucked Karina at the salon, I took her to Jeff's house. We took an Uber up there. At the time, his roommate was a gay psychic named George. Honestly, I couldn't make shit like this up. Right when I got there, Jeff said that he wanted to go shoot a Suboxone, so we went upstairs while Karina was downstairs talking to the gay psychic George. When I got back down, I asked George if he liked Karina, and he said, "You're going to have a lot of problems with her." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "While you were up there, she was hitting a bottle of vodka that was in her purse." Which was really ironic because I had a bottle of Jack Daniels in my backpack, so we were both kind of hiding the fact that we were as bad of alcoholics as we each respectively were. Karina and I decided just to stay at Jeff's house that night, and I had a big box of DVDs from my apartment in North Hollywood, some of the belongings that I had picked up after my ex-wife had left me and I had gotten out of prison. My dad had taken me down there and we got some of my belongings from the landlord. Karina picked out the movie Bully, Larry Clark film starring Nick Stahl. When we watched Bully, we both passed out on the couch. I woke up the next morning. I was a little hungover from drinking so heavy the day before, and I saw Karina. She didn't have any makeup on, her hair was frizzy, and honestly, she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen in my entire life. She looked angelic, and she had to go work at the salon. It was maybe like 8:30 in the morning. So Jeff gave Karina a ride to the salon, and I started seeing Karina very frequently after that. Now, I was 32 years old at the time. Yet my parents didn't want me to have any girls over at the house, and it was a constant fucking power struggle with them. I'd always get caught with girls in my bedroom, and then it was very embarrassing because my dad would freak out and kick them out, and he was usually in his tighty-whities when he did this. Karina had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and she had been living out of state, so her parents were letting her stay with them until she could find her own place. They lived in an apartment about 10 minutes outside of Santa Barbara in a town called Goleta, and I couldn't go over there. Karina was making pretty good money working at the salon, so a lot of times we got hotels or we got Airbnbs, and when we couldn't afford that, I would sneak her into my parents' house, and my parents kept catching her over and over and over again, and they were getting increasingly more pissed off about it. So we spent a lot of time hanging out at parks in Santa Barbara. I would wait for Karina to get off work, and then I'd meet her there. We'd walk to the liquor store. We'd each buy a fifth of Jack Daniels whiskey. Our alcoholism really exasperated each other's. I mean, we were both bad before we met each other, and we were both hiding it from people around us. But since we were together and since we were both drunks, that's when things really got bad. And that's when I started really falling in love with Karina. We didn't have that much in common. One of the things that we connected on, her favorite movie was The Great Gatsby. I love the F. Scott Fitzgerald novel. In fact, I have the last line of it tattooed on my ribcage. And so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. I think it's one of the most beautiful lines of any book ever written. So I got it tattooed on me. She really liked the movie, so we talked about that a lot. So come to think of it, we really didn't have that much in common. We were both really bad alcoholics, and we liked The Great Gatsby. But there's only so much you can talk about The Great Gatsby. When I had gotten out of prison, one of the first jobs that I got was moving furniture. One of my friend's brothers had hooked me up with the job. But when I caught the pimping and pandering case, I told him about it, and he had to fire me. He's like, "There's no way that you can work for me. as a convicted pimp. It's just a bad look, and I totally understood. So I was pretty much jobless. Well, I was jobless, and Karina was supporting me. I always used to say that she was my sugar mama. And she would work, and she got a lot of cash tips, and then we go to the liquor store, and we buy the alcohol, and sometimes I'd sneak her into the house, sometimes we get an Airbnb, but we really didn't have any plans for the future. I think, she knew that I was probably going back to prison, so it was kind of just like a drunken fling. We had met on Cinco de Mayo, and we just were starting off to have a really drunk and out-of-control summer. We definitely fought a lot, even in the beginning, because we were both such belligerent drunks. And right around that time, I got a call from Will De Los Santos. Will had written the 2002 film Spun. It was starring Mickey Rourke, Brittany Murphy, Ron Jeremy was in it, Debbie Harry, John Leguizamo. I never say that guy's name right, but you know who I'm talking about. And I had contacted Will, I don't know, maybe 6 months before this. Originally, I had approached a guy named Daniel Yost. He wrote the 1989 movie Drugstore Cowboy starring Matt Dillon, and I wanted him to adapt Wasting Talent into a film. But it didn't work out with Daniel Yost, and then my second choice was Will De Los Santos because I was a fan of Spun. And Will had read the book. He particularly liked the pocket butthole section, and he said that he was interested in adapting it into a film, and he wanted this guy Chris Hanley, who had produced American Psycho and Buffalo 66 and Bully, and he had also produced Spun. He wanted him to be the producer. So before I went to prison, we were close to getting a deal where he was going to option it, and he was going to adapt it into a script. And then when I got out, right after I caught the pimping and pandering case, and I was kind of just running around aimlessly with Karina, getting wasted all the time, I got a call from Will, and he said they were ready to move forward with the film deal, that he was going to buy the rights to my book, and that he was going to turn it into a movie. And I was absolutely thrilled about it. There was an outlet called Gonzo Today, which is an online magazine, kind of in the tradition of Hunter S. Thompson. They cover counterculture news, and they do a lot of interviews. And they had been wanting to do an article about me for a long time. And right when the film deal went through, I contacted them, this guy named Kidman, and I said, hey, Will De Los Santos just optioned Wasting Talent from me. Chris Hanley's going to produce it. Why don't you have me on your podcast? Because they were about to start a podcast. And he said that that'd be great, that he could have me on the inaugural episode of the Gonzo Today podcast, and we could make the announcement that Will De Los Santos was going to be optioning and adapting Wasting Talent into a script. So we did the episode together, and it was really great. I mean, to be able to post that on Facebook and share that exciting news with everyone. My dad had always kind of my mom and dad had always kind of had quasi support for my writing. I mean, I think they thought that it was more of a hobby than anything else. And the fact that I got a film deal, made them realize that this might be something beyond just a hobby. Karina's alcoholism started getting really bad. I mean, before she met me, like I said, she was a covert alcoholic, but now that we were together, she didn't really have to hide it anymore, and she was getting worse and worse. She was starting to show up at work really wasted. One time we stole a bottle of wild turkey from Trader Joe's. We were stumbling around Santa Barbara, and she stepped off a curb and she fell right on her face. Blood started pouring out of her mouth, and she said, "Look at what you did to me." And there were all these people, there were all these Mexican gangbangers kind of just looking, and I just ran away. I mean, it looked really bad. I don't want people to think that I beat her or anything. But we started getting in kind of these ridiculously, drunk and belligerent situations all the time. And she was showing up at work drunk. One time she stumbled and fell right as she was walking into the entrance of her work. And eventually they let her go. So now we no longer had her paychecks or tip money to support our alcoholism. So I started hustling, and one of the things that I did is I went and I signed up for food stamps, and they give you $190 a month. And what I would do is I would stand outside the grocery store, and I would just approach somebody and say, hey, if you're going to buy anything in this grocery store, let me go buy it with my card, and then you just give me the cash for it. I'll give you $20 off. And, so we'd get $150 worth of alcohol, and I was sneaking her in my parents' house. We had an entire system where she'd sneak in, I'd go in first, then I'd open the window, she'd crawl in it, we'd drink, we'd fuck, And then when she was going to pass out, she'd just go pass out in the closet because my parents were always doing like reconnaissance missions in the morning, making sure that she wasn't there. But they caught us one too many times, and they ended up kicking me out. I was going to get paid for the film rights to Wasting Talent, but I wasn't getting paid until the film was financed. So I didn't know when I was going to get paid. I didn't know if it was going to be a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, 10 years. But what I did know is I didn't have a job. Karina just got fired from her job, and we had nowhere to stay. So my parents let me pick up some of my belongings, and I went upstairs. I went in my mom's purse, and I took pictures of all of her credit cards. And I started staying in Airbnbs with their credit cards. Now, I don't like stealing from my parents, but I always justified it in my head that, I mean, they have so much money, it's not going to affect them. And I literally had nowhere else to stay. I mean, once in a while I could stay with Jeff, but his gay psychic roommate was jealous of me for some reason. He would get jealous because when I was over there, Jeff didn't give him as much attention, you know, if I wasn't over there. So I couldn't stay there all the time. I couldn't stay at Karina's parents' house, and I had a couple other friends that would let me stay periodically, but nowhere long term. Karina's best friend, Kendra, lived with her mom, and once in a while, if I had nowhere to go, she'd let me stay in her car that was parked in the driveway. And then in the middle of the night, she would bring me out Pop-Tarts, and I would just kind of shiver in the back seat, and the only warmth I had were these toasted fucking Pop-Tarts. It was ridiculous. We still stayed at Airbnb once in a while, but we did it pretty infrequently because I didn't want my parents to notice on the credit card bill. We had some pretty weird experiences. One time we rented a room, I think it was like $60, and we got there at like 10:15 at night. It was one of those Airbnbs where they had a little lockbox at the front door, and you type in a code, and it lets you inside. And I think they were renting to like 3 or 4 other people. I mean, everybody had like individual rooms. So we go inside of our room, and we had a bottle of Jack Daniels, and we were getting drunk. Then the first like 15 minutes, we got in the bed and we started fucking. I mean, that's what people do when they rent a room, right? I mean, we're like in our early 30s. We just started dating. Anyway, we start fucking, and all of a sudden I get a text message, and it's from the owner of the Airbnb. Now, a lot of times when you stay at places like this, the owner's not anywhere to be found. It's just a property that they're renting out. But it was a message from the owner, and they said, "We can hear what you're doing." And we looked at our phone, and I told Karina, I'm like, "Hey, they can hear us having sex." Karina's like, "What the fuck?" So we started playing music on her cell phone, you know, to try to mask the sound of it. It's not like we're just going to stop because they told us to. So we start playing music, and I go right back to fucking her. And now I get a phone call from the owner. And I turn the music down. I answer the phone. I say, "Yeah, what's up?" And they say, "We have children in the house. How dare you?" And they hang up on me. So I message them, and Karina's like, "What's up?" And I'm like, "Dude, they're like tripping that we're having sex." And I message them, and I'm like, "Hey, we rented a room for you guys for $60. What are we supposed to be doing? What do you think we're going to be doing? What do people do when they rent a room?" And they said, "Getting some sleep might be a good option." We were like, "All right, we want a refund." And we ended up leaving. And that night, I think we snuck back into my parents' house, and we got caught. And my parents got so upset by this, the fact that we were like actually sneaking in their house after they had kicked me out, that they got a restraining order against Karina. And I'd come to find out later that it was something more serious than that, than just them being mad that we were sneaking into their house. But I'll get to that a little later. Now, around this time, Will De Los Santos had completed the first draft of the film adaptation of Wasting Talent. And he sent it over to me, and the first thing that upset me about the script, we had many, many creative differences, but the first thing that really upset me was that he had renamed the film to Love in Vain. Vain spelled Vein, little play on words. Very fucking clever, Will. And he had renamed it Love in Vain instead of Wasting Talent, a book that had taken me 3 years to write, but Will had said that it wasn't cinematic enough. One thing that I liked is that he had sent an executive summary with actors and actresses that he had wanted to cast as roles for the film. And for the lead role, Damien Cantwell, which is basically me. I mean, the novel is Roman a clef, meaning it's loosely autobiographical. I changed some details. I mean, it was about a guitar prodigy. I never played the guitar in my fucking life, except for maybe Guitar Hero. But for Damien, he had cast Nick Stahl. Nick Stahl was the star of Bully, the first movie that Karina and I had watched the first night that we had met. And Nick Stahl is one of my favorite actors. I think he's one of the best actors of his generation. He played John Connor in Terminator 3, and he played the Yellow Bastard in Sin City. But his most transcendent, exceptional role was definitely Bobby Kent in Bully. I think that Nick should have won an Oscar for that role. And he'd gotten a letter of intent, meaning that he had sent the script to Nick and Nick's manager, and then Nick was interested in playing the lead role of Damien. I would come to find out in the film industry that letters of intent are used to help secure financing. This is something we could show people that were interested in putting money up for the film, saying that we would have Nick Stahl playing the lead. So, I mean, I didn't like that Will had changed the name from Wasting Talent to Love in Vain, but Nick Stahl is an actor that I really admired ever since I first saw him in Bully, and I was really excited for the prospect of Nick essentially playing me in the film adaptation of my first novel. My mom would let me use her car once in a while, even though I was kicked out of their place. She had an X3 BMW, which is one of those SUVs, and it had plenty of the room in the back that Karina and I could sleep in. And even though Karina's parents let her sleep at her place, I wasn't allowed to sleep over there. So whenever I had my mom's car, Karina would hang out with me, we'd get wasted, and we'd go park up in the mountains by my parents' house, and we'd just lay in the back seat, and we'd open the sunroof so that we could look at the stars in our own romantic, delinquent, fucked up way. It was pretty romantic. My grandmother passed away June 13th, 2017. June 13th was a pretty significant date. It was my mom's birthday, and it was also the date when I'd gotten sober for 3 years. That was my clean date, June 13th. So this particular night, I was hanging out with my mom because it was her birthday, and we were watching The Pursuit of Happiness, the Will Smith movie. She got a call that my grandmother had died, and about a week later, we had to go up there for the funeral. My mom had already gone up a few days before, and that night, Karina and I had stolen a bunch of wine from my parents, and we got drunk, and we were fucking as usual. And we had sex a lot. I mean, 3, 4, 5 times a day, remember. Besides bro chop porn and The Great Gatsby, sex is really the only thing we had in common besides being alcoholics. And I would always come inside of Karina. So that night, the night before my grandmother's funeral, I asked her, I said, hey, I never see you take birth control. I don't wear condoms. I'm always coming inside of you. What kind of birth control are you on? And she said that she was on the Depot shot. And I said, okay, well, when's the last time you took it? Now, this is June. And she told me she hadn't taken it since November. So I Googled it, and it said 12 to 14 weeks is how long it lasts. So we were well beyond that. And we got in a really bad fight about it. So we were fighting when I went up to San Francisco, and then I came back. And our relationship was pretty tumultuous, probably because of the alcohol. I mean, we were always shit-faced. 2 fists of whiskey each a day. And we started really having problems in our relationship at this point. One day I was driving. We were going down to Hollywood to meet Will De Los Santos. This is after I'd gotten the film deal. And I got a message on Facebook from Karina's ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. And she said, keep your bitch on a leash. And she sent me a screenshot that Karina had written her ex and said that she was still in love with him and that she didn't really have feelings for me. And it was just sort of like a fling. And I very calmly said, hey, can I see your cell phone for a second? She handed it to me, and I very stoically threw the phone out the window, and we were on the freeway. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing? And I think I spit on her. And I mean, I was really hurt. You know, I mean, she had betrayed me. And the thing about Karina that I didn't know then is that she's a completely different person when she's drunk. I mean, like most people, alcohol just makes you kind of a thin shell of the person you were before you were drunk, especially if you abuse alcohol on the level that we were doing it on. You know, and we got in a fight for a couple days, and then we made back up. And that was a pattern with us. But my trust for Karina was definitely wavering at this point. And I started being scandalous in my own right. I mean, we just had a very disingenuous relationship. My mom had gotten us tickets to go see the Roger Waters show, the singer and bassist for Pink Floyd. And I'd seen him twice before. I saw him on the Dark Side of the Moon show at the Hollywood Bowl, and I saw him at Coachella. Both times, of course, I was completely fried out of my mind on LSD. And I was really looking forward to going to see Roger Waters again. I hadn't seen him since, I think, '08 or '09. And I had scored some blotter acid before the show. Karina had never done it before. And I just got one hit each, and I put it in some cellophane, and I put it in my wallet. My mom had said that we could come pick the car up the next day and that we could drive down to the show with it. So we were planning on going down there and taking the acid. I don't even think we had a plan of where we were going to stay. I mean, you know, with Pink Floyd, kind of goes like that. It's a kind of an organic thing. We'll take acid, we'll figure it out later. And the day of the show, my mom called me, and she was in tears. And I said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And she's like, "You're a little asshole." And I said, "Why? What's up?" And she said, "We got the credit card statement. We found out that you've been getting Airbnbs. I think it run up like $1,800, something ridiculous like that." And she said, "We're definitely not going to let you use the car tonight." And my mom and I got in this huge fight. I mean, I was in the wrong. What could I say? But I was drunk and I wasn't in the right state of mind. And I got really upset with her. So Karina and I frantically try to figure out something else. We posted ads on Craigslist. We post on Facebook. Is anyone going down to the Staples Center to go to the show? And we couldn't find a ride. So we ended up getting a gallon of, I think, wild turkey. And we just showed up at my friend Jesse's house. That was like a very common play for us. Jesse owned a house, and it was one of those houses where it was kind of always open for us. Sometimes we wore out our welcome and he kicked us out, and sometimes, you know, he had split custody of his daughter. Whenever she was there, I couldn't be there because I was just such a drunken mess, and I was always shooting Suboxone. But we showed up at his house with this gallon of whiskey that we had, and we started fighting immediately. And we were fighting so much that he was just like, "Listen, I'm going to go to a bar. You guys can stay here." And the fight was the reoccurring fight that we always have. One that, you know, she had lied to me about birth control, even though she was convinced that she'd been on Depo for so long that she couldn't get pregnant at this point. And the other thing was that she had contacted her ex behind my back. It always made me not trust her, and it was always my go-to when we were fighting. And her go-to is that I had a small dick. She said, "Your dick looks like a root beer barrel that somebody sucked on and spit on a barber shop floor." You know, which is true. How could I argue with that? It was absolutely true. So we got completely wasted. Jesse was gone. And I go in the bathroom. And for some reason, I opened my wallet. I had forgotten that I had the blotter acid inside of there. And without even thinking, I just took one of the hits of blotter and I put it on my tongue. And of course, it's 2017. So I took the obligatory acid pose selfie with my tongue out and the hit of blotter in the center of my tongue. And Karina came in and she said, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I want to take one too." So I gave her a hit, which was a completely bad idea. Anyone that has any experience with psychedelics knows that, first of all, you can't take it when you're belligerently drunk like that. And we were already fighting about the birth control, which incidentally I was still coming inside of her all the time. It didn't dissuade me whatsoever. I was just mad at her for being irresponsible. We were fighting about her ex, and we had drinking about a gallon of whiskey between us. Jesse wasn't there. Somehow we made it into the guest room that we frequently stayed in, and the sun was just starting to go down. And we got in bed and took her pants down and started fucking my girl. One of the benefits of shooting Suboxone all the time is that it makes me last forever. So we probably had sex for an average of 45 minutes every time we did it. So when we had started, the sun was going down, and by the time I was getting to the end, it was completely pitch black inside the room. And now the acid had kicked in. I remember it started feeling very slimy. Everything got kind of weird. And I just heard Karina whimpering. This is right after I came. And I said, "What? What's wrong?" And I was feeling that electric pulse of the LSD. I turn the lights on, and tears are streaming down her face. And she goes, "Why would you bring me to this place?" And her pupils were huge, and I could just see that she was having nightmarish visions and hallucinating. She was crying hysterically, telling me that she saw demons coming out of the carpet. But I'm like, Jesus, what did you take? I mean, I was tripping and, everything was a little melty. That's what happens when I take acid. But she was having full-blown apparition hallucinations of demons. And we started noticing how satanic Jesse's house was. He had pentagram-shaped chandeliers, and we saw these shadowy, demonic shapes. And Karina was truly terrified. And we had a really bad trip. I mean, the rest of it, we basically held each other, and I was kind of nurturing her and bringing her back to some semblance of sanity. And I realized how much I truly loved her, because I had real empathy for her. And when you truly love another person, it's an entirely different shade of empathy. It's something that you only feel when you truly love another person. So the next day, we had kind of a revelation about our relationship, that we actually had feelings for each other. I mean, LSD had kind of solidified those feelings because they were very murky and convoluted before that. We didn't really understand what they meant. Now, at the time, she was getting progressively worse. I mean, she was worse than when she had gotten fired from her job with the alcohol. And it got to the point where she got into some physical altercations with her family, and they had pretty much kicked her out of the house as well. So now we could only stay at certain people's houses, like Jesse's house, Jeff's house sometimes. Sometimes we stayed in Kendra's car, but our options for where we could stay were pretty limited. After Karina had gotten fired, and really my only hustle was either selling welfare food stamps to get alcohol, or us going to the local grocery store to steal bottles of alcohol. One of the things that we used to do is go to open houses. We would just look, on the internet, and we would find houses that were for sale, and we would go to them in hopes that they would have like a wine cellar or like a wine cabinet, and Karina would have like a big Gucci purse, and we'd go to these open houses and we'd just steal a bunch of bottles of wine. Sometimes we did that at local hotels too, but from doing all these open houses, I had conceptualized a scheme. I told Karina, I said, what if we go to open houses and we pretend like we're actually looking to buy a place? We looked for places that are furnished. Some places have stage furniture. As long as the people that actually own the house aren't living there at the moment. And we go there, we both cleaned up very nice. We looked preppy if we wanted to. Karina's a very beautiful girl, and that always helps in situations like this. So we started going to these open houses, and we'd ask if the tenants were still living there. We'd say, hey, we just inherited some money. We've never bought a home before. We've rented together, but we're looking to buy something immediately. Are the people still living here? How does it work? And if the realtor said that the people weren't living there, that it was just stage furniture or whatever the case, I would ask to use the bathroom, and I would go and unlatch the window. And then Karina and I would come back later, and we would sneak into the house, and we would sleep there. And we were basically squatting in houses that were on the market that we knew no one was living there. Some of them even had TVs and everything. And it was a nice little scam. And what we would do is we would set the alarm on my phone, and we would wake up at 6 a.m. Sometimes construction people would get there to do some work, some remodeling. There were a few close calls, but this worked. I mean, we did this for weeks. And a lot of times there wasn't a TV there, and our only source of entertainment was my iPhone. And I would sit there and I would watch skate videos all day. Sometimes we'd watch stand-up comedy. That's one thing that we both enjoyed. Sometimes we'd watch bro chop porn. And Karina had no interest in skateboarding. I'd always try to show her something. I'd be like, look how cool this part is, or, look at this trick. And she didn't give a fuck about it. But one skater that I'd showed her was a guy named Antoine Dixon. He's a black guy from Carson, California, kind of like a gangbanger vibe. His brother's doing a life sentence in prison for being a gangbanger, and they basically grew up in South LA, but Antoine was a skateboarding prodigy, and he had been catapulted to fame when he was in the Baker 3 video. And we watched a little documentary that I think Vice had done about him, and I watched it. I thought it was really interesting, and I showed it to her. I said, hey, Karina, check this out. And it was it was an epically latered series. on Vice. So it was like a 3 or 4 part documentary series. And I showed it to her. And Antoine would get in fistfights at shows, at demos. He got arrested for punching a cop. He got in a fight on a commercial airline. And he was like a raging alcoholic. And he was always getting locked up. And his career had basically imploded. And she said, wow, that guy's really interesting. Now, I used to have connections with Spike TV when I was an associate producer and I was brokering media for that company. So I got on my Instagram and I was pretty much blacked out drunk, but I commented on one of his posts and I said, hey, I have an opportunity for you. Because in my drunk, delusional mind, I thought because I just got the film deal and because I actually had connections with Spike, that I could come up with a show about him. Because if Karina, someone who's not interested in skateboarding at all, was interested in this guy, maybe I could get together with him and I could come up with some sort of show and I could pitch it to the network. We desperately needed money at the time. So I left this comment not thinking anything would come of it. And somehow, maybe I had sent him a DM or something. The next day I got a phone call from him. I didn't even remember posting the comment until I got the call. And he said, yo, this is Chong. And I pretty much told him what my situation was, that I was a novelist. I just got a film deal. I had some connections with network television. Would he be interested if we came up with some sort of reality show about him? And he said that he was. And he said, hey, why don't I put you in touch with a guy named Zach Warren? He's kind of been going around filming me for the last 10 years, and maybe you guys can join forces. And that's how I met Zach Warren. And I remember when I was in jail, somebody told me that they had won $50,000 doing the California Lottery Second Chance. Now, each lotto scratcher ticket has what's called a second chance. When people don't claim scratcher lotto tickets, it goes into some pool of like missed money fund or something, and you can get an app on your phone and you can get a scratcher, a losing scratcher, and you can scan the barcode and it gets put into the second chance pot. So I would go to 7-Eleven and different liquor stores and I would just literally dig in the trash because I thought that it was a mathematical certainty that if I entered enough second chance lotto tickets, that I was bound to make some sort of money. I did this all day long. This was my job. So when I contacted Zach Warren, because Antoine Dixon had given me his phone number, he asked me what I had going on, and I definitely didn't mention the Lotto Second Chance scheme that I was trying, but I told him the truth that, I had just recently sold the film rights to my novel, and that I was going back to prison, I thought, because of the pimping and pandering case. But we had a certain kind of chemistry, and we hit it off right from the get-go. And he asked me if I had any ideas of the show that I wanted to do with Antoine, because I had explained to him that I had connections with Spike TV, and I really hadn't put much thought into it. But I said, probably the first thing that we should do is I should come down to LA, and I should meet Antoine, maybe interview him, get a sense of where he's at. He had just gotten out of jail and he was like in some sort of treatment program as conditions of his parole. So I went down there and I met Antoine. Zach, for some reason he couldn't make it, but he had sent some camera crew. So I started talking to Antoine about what was going on in his life, and he had just gotten out of jail. I knew that. He'd also just recently lost his mom, and his mom was like his rock. She was kind of his anchor of stability when he was kind of in a bad place. So after meeting up with him, I went up to Santa Barbara and I corresponded with Zach a little bit over the phone, and I came up with an idea for a show. It was going to be called Resurrection, Antoine Resurrection, but it could be interchangeable and it didn't just have to be Antoine. We could apply this to anybody that had some sort of pre-existing millennial following. The whole concept of the show, it would have been a reality show, and we find somebody that was doing well professionally, whether it be a pro skateboarder, a UFC fighter, hip-hop artist, something that would resonate with millennials, and somehow because of drug addiction, mental health, incarceration, their career got derailed, and the reality show would chronicle them trying to refurbish their career. So Zach had a bunch of archival footage of Antoine, and he came up to Santa Barbara. We met again, we hit it off. I mean, we already had chemistry over the phone, but once we saw each other in person, we really had a very good work relationship, good work ethic. We just worked well together. We made a sizzle, which is, a rudimentary visual representation of what a show would look like that you can present to prospective networks or investors. We did it in about 3 days with a bunch of his archival footage and some of the new footage that we had shot when I went down there and interviewed him. And we made the sizzle for Antoine Resurrection. And so I contacted some of my old connections over at Spike, and I got some meetings set up. I also had a couple other networks that were interested down in LA, including Vice. Karina and I's alcoholism didn't take pause, and around this time, I get another message from her ex's new girlfriend saying that she's at it again, this time sending emails. We got in a huge blowout fight. I poured a beer on her right when I found out. We were at some park at the time, and I broke up with her. I did the 2017 breakup where I changed my relationship status on Facebook. So it was Facebook officially broken up. And it was a couple days before my birthday. I was about to turn 32. And that night, I went out with a couple of my friends. And I was on federal probation at the time, so I was getting tested pretty frequently. But I had become sort of an expert in beating drug tests. So that night, we had gotten some crack. We were going to smoke a bunch of crack cocaine and go out to the strip clubs. And before we went to the strip clubs, we went to a crack house to pick up. And I'm sitting there with the tube, straight shooter, taking a booyah blast. And it's right about to turn midnight. I took a hit maybe at 11:58, 11:59. And I remember blowing the crack hit out right at midnight. And all of a sudden, my phone dinged. A text message came out. And I was ringing from the crack hit, and I look at my text, and it's a picture of a positive pregnancy test from a phone number that I didn't recognize. Karina was pregnant. I was in shock, and the bell ringer from the crack certainly didn't help. I proceeded to get really drunk the rest of that night. When I woke up hungover the next day, and I met up with Karina even though we were broken up. And I told her, I said, if you want to keep the baby, then I'll try to be the best father that I can be. But if you don't want to keep the baby, then I'll support you just the same. But you're the woman, and I don't want to put any pressure on you either way. And so for my 32nd birthday, I went with Karina to Planned Parenthood, and we went to a doctor's appointment just to find out if she was actually pregnant, and if there was going to be any damage to the baby if she decided to keep it due to the fact that we were such hardcore alcoholics when it was conceived. At the end of that day, we went over to my parents' house, and I told Karina, I said, well, it is my birthday. You are going to fuck me for my birthday, right? And she just smiled, and we had sex, and I got drunk in front of her, but she didn't have any alcohol. The second that she found out she was pregnant, she stopped. And slowly but surely we got back together. About a week later, I stopped drinking myself, just out of respect for her. Now we were back together, and I certainly didn't want to be drinking in front of her while she was pregnant because I knew she had such a bad problem with alcohol, and I didn't think it'd be fair to her. The second that Zach Warren had come into my life, my financial situation had helped considerably because he started helping me out. He started putting us in hotels and Airbnbs, and now that Karina was pregnant, he certainly wanted to help me while we were trying to sell the sizzle. And we had gone down and we had met with my connection at Spike TV, and they weren't interested in the show because they said that focusing on one person like Antoine wasn't enough. If we were going to do a show like Resurrection, we had to focus on 3 people and like one episode. So an entire season would be comprised of like 3 different parallel stories. So we took some more meetings, and every time we took a meeting, I'd be in dress clothes and I'd be like diving in dumpsters in front of liquor stores trying to get my second chance lotto tickets. Zach Warren told me that I didn't need to do that anymore, and he just started giving me money. I think he was embarrassed that I was always going into trash cans anytime we went for a stop. We met with a few more networks, and every time we went for meetings, people kept saying that the real story was with me. That my story was really interesting, that I'd come from an upper middle class family, that I'd gotten involved with an international cartel and served time in federal prison, and then wrote a best-selling novel, and now I was going back to prison for pimping and pandering, and that my life would make a really good documentary. Why weren't we focusing on me? And that's really when like the light bulb went off and I started considering that maybe I should make a documentary about myself. And I'd contacted one of my good friends, Jim Uls. Jim Uls had written the screenplay for Fight Club. He had adapted Chuck Palahniuk's novel into the David Fincher film that starred Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. And Jim said that he thought a documentary about my life was a really good idea and that he would be interested in actually writing it. So now that we had Jim Uls, screenwriter of Fight Club, interested in writing the documentary, things really started taking off pretty quickly. And I'd contacted my friend Max Peretz. He had a lot of money. He owned his own company. And I asked him about potentially financing it. And he had agreed to partially finance the film. So now we had financing. We were going to have it written by Jim Uls. And Zach Warren wanted to make his directorial debut on the film. And I came up with the name, Idiot Savant, The Savage Life of Ryan Leone. The reason I wanted to call it Idiot Savant was because I felt that that's what I was. I mean, yeah, I had really excelled in writing and creative stuff. And I had a way of making things happen. But I had no fucking common sense. I was a fucking idiot when it came down to it. And that's, I think, what made my story interesting to other people, that it was a contradiction. Once we had decided to do Idiot Savant, we sort of abandoned the Resurrection Project, and we began to hit the documentary full throttle. When I was in my early 20s and I was working with various television networks down in Los Angeles, I'd conceptualized a show called Copbusters. It was going to be like the show Cops, except we were going to get crooked cops in trouble. And although I wanted it to be reality-based, I came up with a skeletal script so that we could stage a pilot episode and present it to a television network. And the idea that I had was we would get a girl, we would have some sort of grainy dashboard cam. So she'd be driving, get pulled over, and she's about to get arrested for a DUI, and then she looks at the cop and says, "Is there anything I can do to get out of this?" And it cuts to her sucking his dick, and then we all pop out like the show Punk'd, and we go, "You're on Copbusters, motherfucker." YouTube was still in its infancy at the time, but I'd stumbled across a young filmmaker named Stephen Gabriel. And what Gabriel was doing is he was going down to Skid Row in Los Angeles, Tent City, and he was interviewing the homeless, the addicted, toothless crackheads, and he turned the footage into short-form cinematic haikus. Very, very visceral stuff. And I was instantly a fan when I came across his work. And somehow I'd contacted him and I told him that I was working on a pilot episode for a TV show called Copbusters. I explained the premise to him. He seemed like an introverted guy over the phone, but I think I offered him $5,000 if he'd come up to Santa Barbara. He was living down in Burbank. So Steve agreed to do it. I bought him a train ticket and I went and I picked him up. Now at the time, I was probably smoking $300 or $400 worth of crack cocaine a day, if not more, sometimes $600. I was buying it in 8 balls and powder, cooking it on a salad spoon on my stove, and smoking crack all day on top of a gargantuan heroin habit. I was also selling copious amounts of drugs. I remember picking him up. I was in really bad shape, and when he came over to my house, I had 50 pounds of psilocybin mushrooms just sitting in trash bags on the coffee table in my living room. And he kind of saw the circus that I was living. I was in a completely toxic, codependent relationship with Jenny. It was very turbulent. We were always fighting. And he started filming all of it. He captured the toxicity of our relationship. He got me smoking crack, shooting heroin. I remember I was running around with a .32 Cobra, little military police gun at the time. And he was filming all these pounds of drugs I had, stacks of cash. Filmed me for an entire week. We ended up making the pilot for Copbusters. I went to the local sober living and I hired, guys that had mustaches, overweight, mid-50s that actually looked like cops, and I had ordered police uniforms off eBay, and we did the scripted pilot as we had planned. But for the entire time that Gabriel was there, he was filming me and my crazy behavior. I don't remember how it ended because this was like 15 years ago and my memory's pretty foggy from back then because of the amount of drugs that I was ingesting on a daily basis. But somehow we ended up parting on bad terms. I think he ultimately ran out of my house and ran for the hills, and I had threatened to have my cartel Mexican mafia associates track him down and murder him, even though I didn't know anybody in the Mexican mafia and I didn't have cartel associates. Eventually, I got busted by the feds. I went to prison, and I forgot about Gabriel. I mean, we lost contact. One day, I was talking to my friend Jeff over the phone, and he said, "Hey, I wonder whatever happened to the footage that Gabriel had taken of us." I mean, he was filming Jeff shooting up too, back when we were in our early 20s. Now he's a successful real estate broker, but back then he was a horrible junkie just like me. And somehow Jeff had found some short form documentaries that Gabriel had posted on YouTube. I think it was Stephen Gabriel heroin movie or something. I don't know how Jeff had found it, but somehow he did. And sure enough, Steve had turned some of the footage that he had taken of me and turned it into a short form documentary. Me telling the story about stabbing the skinhead when I was 18. It's still up on YouTube, and I post it on my channel now. But we tried to contact him about it. I was actually mad. I think I was a year sober when I saw this video, and I was like embarrassed that this horrible footage existed of me talking about having a pregnant girl suck dick for heroin and me stabbing a skinhead. I was a year sober, and I had that behind me, so I didn't want it on YouTube. So I wanted to contact him for the simple sake of him just taking the thing down, but we couldn't get a hold of him. I could not find him anywhere. I told Zach Warren about this guy and about this footage, and there was possibly more footage, and that it was imperative that we track him down right when Zach and I started pre-production for Idiot Savant, The Savage Life of Ryan Leone. And once again, I made an effort to track Gabriel down, and this time I found him on Facebook. I think Jeff actually was the one that found him once again. And I contacted him. I sent him a Facebook message, and his reaction was, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're alive. I thought for sure that you were dead. I mean, somebody that was living your kind of lifestyle, and I hadn't heard from you for so long. I actually thought you were dead." So getting a message from you on Facebook is like hearing the voice of a ghost. And Gabriel explained to me that he was living in a psych ward in Texas because he was doing some sort of experimental clinical drug trial where he was basically a guinea pig for a bunch of doctors that were taking tests on him. And I think he was getting paid like $7,000. Some weirdo shit that only somebody like Stephen Gabriel, some weird introvert, would be doing. I really stressed to Zach Warren how important getting Gabriel out to California would be. You know, I think he had like 2 weeks left in the clinical trial at the psych ward that he was at. And he had told me that he probably had 40 hours of footage in storage at his mom's place. And I think she lived somewhere in Texas. I don't know. I think Houston, maybe. We already had some of the budget, so we had money to spend. And, you know, I really liked Gabriel's work anyway. I told Zach that it was very comparable to Larry Clark in the beginning of his career, that cinema verite realism, and I thought that he would be a good addition to the project if we brought him back on as the editor for a documentary that he had started, 15 years before. It was just a cool story in itself. So he agreed to come out to Santa Barbara. At this point, Jeff was renting a room out to Karina and I. So we were living in Jeff's condo, and Zach was paying the rent for us. Stephen Gabriel was going to come move in. He was going to sleep on the couch. So we were all living in the same condo, kind of like the setup we had the first time he had come out to do the pilot for Cop Busters, because Jeff was my roommate back then as well. When Gabriel came out, he had stopped by his mom's place and he had gotten the footage that he had of me out of storage. But they were on mini DV tapes, so Zach had to buy what's called a deck, which essentially transfers mini DV to a digital format. It digitalizes it. And we also had... My dad always had a camcorder when I was growing up, and we had literally hundreds of hours of home footage on VHS tape, which we also digitalized. So we were starting to accumulate quite a bit of footage. When we saw the Stephen Gabriel stuff, it was better than anything we could have hoped for. I mean, I was in really bad shape, emaciated, probably 126 pounds, covered in acne. It's very gory, me shooting speedballs, throwing up, screaming at my ex, running around with a gun in my waistband, selling kilos of different powder drugs, and we had footage of all the lithographs and stacks of cash, and I was blown away with the footage. And anytime I had watched a documentary about a so-called train wreck, whether it be Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Hunter S. Thompson, somebody that had a larger-than-life, debaucherous reputation, I always wanted to see the gory details. I wanted to see the needle going into Kurt's vein. I wanted to see Amy drinking out of a Jack Daniels bottle. But those documentaries always held back. And what we wanted to do was be kind of revolutionary and showing, warts and all, a very candid and naked portraiture of the ugliness of my addiction and all the different sub-problems that came with that. The toxic relationship, the incarceration, etc. I had gotten footage from my attorneys with me doing interviews with the feds, different footage of my federal conspiracy case and also my pimping and pandering case. So with my home footage, the Stephen Gabriel footage, and all the legal footage that we had with my case, and really compelling stuff, showing the cartel getting raided and showing what I was saying when I was talking to the detectives about the pimping case, which is really golden $1 million footage. We really had enough to make a good film, but we still had to do the interviews. So Zach started having people come down to interview my family and friends, and we had huge production shoots with big spotlights over it, the big sound booms. We had a director of photography now that was working with us, and Zach was conducting the interviews. And we were filming a real movie. I mean, when we were doing these shoots, it looked like an independent film was being shot. I mean, we had a large crew that Zach had somehow orchestrated to come do the project, a lot on a deferred payment basis, and we got underway with the production of Idiot Savant. So we had Jim Oles that was going to write it after we finished shooting, because that's how you write a documentary. You do it in post-production. And he was the screenwriter of Fight Club. We also had Will De Los Santos, who wrote and produced Spun. He was going to be an executive producer. He was going to get his friend Chris Hanley to be a producer. Chris Hanley had produced American Psycho, Buffalo 66, and he had also produced Spun and Bully, all some of my favorite films. And Will had also connected me with a producer named Wendy Benj, who had worked with Oliver Stone. She'd worked on some of the Saw movies, and she was doing the contractual legal work. So we had a real crew. All of Zach's technical people, camera crew. We had Stephen Gabriel there to do the editing, and we had some A-list producers that were helping us with the distribution side once we got things done, and we had Wendy to do the contractual legal work. So we had a professional group of people to actually execute this concept. And we also had amazing archival footage, and we were going to do some really great interviews, not just with family and friends, also with some interesting people that were fans of my work, like the porn star Sasha Grey, Mark Boone Jr., actor from Sons of Anarchy. And I wanted to have somebody famous narrate the film. I thought that the perfect person would be Nick Stahl, because Nick Stahl had signed on to play Damien, which is the protagonist of my novel Wasting Talent, and he was going to play it in the film version, Love in Vain. And I thought it would be perfect if Nick narrated my documentary, because Damien is essentially me. It's kind of like Johnny Depp narrating a Hunter S. Thompson documentary, because he had played him in Fear and Loathing and in the Rum Diaries. So who better to narrate Hunter's life than Johnny Depp? And I felt the same way about Nick Stahl, even though I didn't know him. Now, Will had sent me a screenshot of something Nick Stahl had said one time. They had been talking about the script, and Will likes to do that because he's such a bullshit artist. If a celebrity says something, he'll take a screenshot and show me as some sort of proof or verification that he actually said it. And he fucked up when he had sent me the screenshot of Nick Stahl, because it had Nick Stahl's email address on it. So I reached out to Nick via email, and I introduced myself. I said, hey, this is Ryan Leone. I'm the author of Wasting Talent, which got adapted into the Love in Vain script, and you're going to be playing Damien, and I have this documentary film. Would you be interested in narrating it? And Nick got back to me right away. Very nice guy. I had been a fan of his work ever since I saw him probably in Disturbing Behavior back in the 90s, but I was also a huge fan of Bully. Bully is one of my all-time favorite films, so I was absolutely honored when I found out that he was going to essentially be playing me in a film. Damien is me. It's just a caricature of me, just like Raoul Duke is a caricature of Hunter S. Thompson. So Nick and I started talking over the phone, and he agreed to narrate the documentary. We started talking daily, and we became really close friends. I mean, I consider him one of my best friends to this day. But during that period, he was just somebody that I talked to a lot because I was making my transition into the film industry, and he was a veteran. I mean, he was a childhood actor and had been in the game for a long time. So he was offering me a lot of guidance. And now that I had him involved, we started reaching out to various press outlets to try to get some coverage for the documentary. Because there were some great, interesting names involved, and we just kind of put our feelers out. I linked up with Seth Ferrante, who's an incredible outlaw journalist, and now he's a filmmaker. And he had agreed to do an article about me for the Huffington Post and for Penthouse Magazine. And then all sorts of smaller publications started stacking up as well. Malibu Magazine did a piece on me, Santa Barbara Independent, Gonzo Today. And I just got a huge flurry of press attention, what seemed like all at once overnight. I mean, I was in like 7 or 8 things. I was always going down to LA to do photo shoots for these different articles that I was going to be appearing in. And I was going to be on the cover of Inked magazine because Zach knew the owner of Inked magazine. So I got sponsored by a tattoo shop in Santa Barbara who had agreed to give me free sleeves for the photo spread as long as I gave him a mention and he could showcase some of his work. And then I started getting sponsored by different clothing companies, coffee companies. People just started sending me a lot of free products because I was getting press attention. And Zach was helping me manipulate that press attention to receiving a bunch of free stuff from various sponsors. So everything was going good initially. But what happened is with all this newfound attention, it really started going in my head. And the worst part about it, what I think ultimately led to my downfall, was that I started getting antagonistic towards my PO.
This call will be recorded and monitored. I have a collect call from an inmate at a San Bernardino County detention facility.
Hello? Hey there, little buddy. Country? Yeah, it's me, little buddy. I'm in jail. Yeah, I heard that. What are you in jail for, man? Well, me and this little beaner, we, got caught breaking into fucking NASA, man. NASA, like the space program? Well, yeah, I got to thinking that there must be goddamn narcotics in space, and if they're gonna have specimens of it anywhere, it's gonna be at goddamn NASA, right, little buddy? Country, I've literally told you 30 times that there's no narcotics in space. Have you ever seen the talented Mr. Ripley, little buddy? The Matt Damon movie? Yeah, one of my meth cook friends told me that they filmed that movie in space. Hey, Country, I love you. I really do, dog. But I'm recording an album right now, and you're taking up time. You need anything? You need me to put money on your books or anything? You okay? Well, that's mighty water, you little buddy. But the wetback I came with an asshole stuffed full of peanut butter crank. We have more commissary than a bobcat on Tiffany Tuesday. Whatever the fuck that means, Country. All right, man. I gotta go. It was really cool talking to you. I hope you're not in too much trouble. I'll be sure to write you, man, all right? Wait, little buddy. There's somebody that wants to say hello to you real quick. All right.
Hey, man.
Taco?
Yeah, it's Taco. I got arrested with your friend. I think he's a faggot, man.
Yeah, I mean, Country is totally a faggot. So are you, though, Taco. I mean, let's be real.
Remember the time that you almost got beat up by a bunch of black guys?
How could I forget that, Taco? Every time that I've talked to you since that happened, you bring it up.
Oh, shit.
What?
2 Native Americans are holding down Country, sucking his dick, man.
What do you mean?
And they're Southsiders butt-fucking on the tier. Full-blown sex riot, man. Hey!
Hello? Talking? Country? You guys there? I had relapsed briefly on heroin in the summer. I'd gone and worked for a telemarketing place in Santa Barbara, and I smelled somebody smoking it in the bathroom. It was my manager. So I cornered him and demanded that he give me some. And I didn't shoot my Suboxone the next day. I pre-planned it. And I started doing heroin for about a week. And Karina's alcoholism was pretty out of control. It was back in the summer, so we went and we checked into a detox center. We were there for a couple days and we got kicked out, but I stopped doing the heroin. Right when I had relapsed, I went to the hospital and I complained about having kidney stones. There's no way to prove that. I'd learned that in a William S. Burroughs book. I think it was in Junkie. So if you go to the hospital and you complain about kidney stones, they usually give you a painkiller. And I did this just in case I got tested by the feds so that I could say that I was on a prescription opioid and I wouldn't go back to prison for doing heroin. Sure enough, I did get a dirty drug test and my PO thought he had me. I remember he had called me. I was at Will De Los Santos' house at the time and he had said, "Hey, you got a dirty for opiates. Are you doing heroin again?" And I said, "No. I'm prescribed Vicodin because I have liver issues. I'm in a great deal of pain, so it's as needed for pain management." And this infuriated him. He knew that I got over on him. He threatened to send it to the lab so that they could try to discern between an illicit opiate and a prescription opioid. I called their bluff. I'd Googled it and I researched how much that cost. I knew that kind of testing cost a lot of money and they weren't going to cough up any money like that just to violate me. They didn't have it in their budget. So, I called their bluff and I never heard anything about it. Supposedly sent it to the lab. I know that it was bullshit. But my relationship with my PO was pretty strained after that. I was out on bail for the pimping and pandering and I started getting much more arrogant as I started getting the press attention and as my career seemed to be taking off. I just thought that I was above him suddenly. And I started treating him accordingly. They had me going to court-ordered therapy, not with the intern who had coerced me into admitting that I had caught the pimping case. It was another therapist who was actually like the head of all the therapists for this particular outpatient program that they were making me go to. And this is the same facility that was testing me. I was on color coding, so I had to call every night, and if my particular color came up, then I had a test. I think I was red. And at this place where I was testing, only women worked there, so they couldn't give me supervised tests. And I don't think the feds knew that. It was just some, local office that they were outsourcing to drug test the people that they had on U.S. probation. So I was beating the test every time. I started smoking a lot of weed at this point. I was smoking weed every day, and you're not allowed to smoke weed on federal probation, even though it's legal recreationally and medicinally in California. They weren't letting us do that on probation. So I started smoking at this point every day because I was just going in whenever they called they were testing me about once a week, and every time I would go in, I would use fake pee that I bought at a head shop, and I would warm it up. I'd boil it in Jeff's condo. I'd put it in a little plastic bottle and I'd put a hand warmer on it to keep it above 98 degrees, put it in my pocket with the hand warmer strapped to it with a rubber band, and I'd put the fake clean pee in the bottle and I'd give them a clean test every time I tested. So I wasn't even worried about it anymore. I was just doing what I wanted. My probation was expiring in December, and now we're in the month of October, and my PO kept telling me that I needed to resolve the pimping and pandering state case before December came, or they were going to make me go to court. And if I went to court for the violation before I was convicted, I was going to be violated anyway. So it was advantageous to me to get it resolved in the state. And now I was really feeling the pressure from that, especially because I felt like they were out to get me because they knew that I got over on them when I got the dirty for heroin. And the therapist that I was seeing, I wasn't getting along with. And when I thought that I was doing good in therapy, when I had a faux positive attitude, my PO would call me in and he would scold me for how bad I was doing in therapy, saying I had a negative attitude. So she was telling me one thing and then she was telling them something entirely different, and it was driving me crazy. I would check in with the attorney that I had on retainer for my state case, a guy named Adam Perlman, and he was telling me that the DA wasn't budging from 3 years. And the whole issue was it was a 3-year mandatory minimum in the state, and then the feds were looking at violating me for possibly 3 years in addition to that. So all in all, I could have served 5 actual years in prison again. And the impending doom of it was pushing me towards full-fledged insanity. Around the time that Karina was getting caught, getting snuck into my parents' house when we'd be shit-faced all those times over that drunk summer, My parents got to the point where they actually filed a restraining order against Karina because it said that it was driving them crazy, finding her in their house all the time. And I thought that was pretty extreme. And then when Karina and I had broken up for those 2 or 3 days right before my birthday and right before I'd found out that she was pregnant, my dad told me that a reliable source had told him that Karina had been arrested for accessory to murder after the fact, but hadn't been convicted of it. And I argued with my dad. I said, there's no way. I mean, Karina may be a lot of things, but she definitely didn't do that. And if she had, that's something she would have told me. It's not something she would have hid from me. But my dad was absolutely convinced this happened because, as he said, a reliable source, whatever the fuck that means, somebody that he trusted. And I didn't know who had told him that. You know, I didn't even know what mutual contacts we had that would even know her, that would also know my dad. I started to not get along with my attorney. He had given me attitude a number of times when I had seen him in court. He kind of talked shit to me, and he knew Karina because he had represented her on a DUI case. She had 3 DUIs, and she was looking at jail time, and he actually got her house arrest. She was a secretary at the law firm that he worked for several years before I had met her, and I think he had represented her on a reduced rate, but for some reason he didn't like her, he didn't like me. His disdain was pretty obvious. He just thought we were a really sleazy couple. Me the pimp, her the drunk, and he just gave us that very pretentious, snooty look every time we saw him. We didn't like the guy at all. And the straw that broke the camel's back was when I was doing the article for Penthouse and also for the Santa Barbara Independent. The journalist wanted to get some comments from my attorney, and he refused to participate in the press. He said that he thought it could work against me. Even though I disagreed, I thought any public support for my case might help sway the DA into making me a better deal, because I didn't really think I deserved 5 years in prison for just brokering prostitution. So I started looking for other attorneys. And now that my social status was being elevated somewhat, I got a recommendation for a woman down in LA named Jen Williams. She was young, but she was definitely fiery, and she had an excellent reputation as an attorney. And I went to go meet with her down there. I got a free consultation. I remember sitting at this long table, kind of thing you'd see in like a corporate conference setting. You know, it had the Los Angeles cityscape behind it. It was a beautiful office, and they poured me ice water and very expensive crystal glasses. And we talked about my case, and they said that it was pretty much a slam dunk for the prosecution and that it was going to be pretty hard to beat the case. I mean, I admitted to it in the police interrogation, and they had me on the phone trying to broker the prostitution deal. I was fucked, basically. But they said that they could take it to trial, and they thought that in a trial setting, there was a much better chance that they could win, but that it would cost $300,000. And I said, well, how confident are you guys that I can actually beat it if I go to trial? And they assured me that they were some of the best legal defense team in all of Los Angeles, even though my case was out of Santa Barbara. They were basically sharks, and for $300,000, we could beat the case. So I was already having an inflated sense of ego from the magazine shoots, the sponsorships, the films, the attention, the entourage, all of it all at once. And I thought that I could somehow raise $300,000. I had wanted to start a nonprofit organization for a long time, wanted to expand literacy in American prisons, and I thought this would probably be the most opportune time to do it. I could launch the nonprofit, and I could also have some fancy celebrity fundraising event with musicians, actors, people that might draw a crowd, and I'd use the proceeds from the ticket to launch my nonprofit and raise the $300,000 needed to take my case to trial and win. At this point, I had accumulated quite a few contacts in Hollywood, and it didn't take very long for me to call in a bunch of favors. I got Danny Trejo to be the host. I think it was going to cost $5,000 or $6,000, and I was getting Immortal Technique, underground hip-hop artist who's constantly espousing prison reform. I thought that he was perfect for my rally, and he always drew pretty big crowds. I'd seen him at the House of Blues, so I knew that he could carry the tickets by himself. But I was also getting a number of famous actors, famous writers, other artists, musicians. Nick Stahl was going to do it, Mark Boone Jr., and I was getting porn stars, Heidi Fleiss, Freeway Ricky Ross had agreed to do it, George Christie, former head of the Ventura chapter, the Hells Angels, and I was trying to get Boston George from Blow, the real Boston George. I knew George Young had gotten out of prison, and I had some contacts that knew him, so I reached out, and someone had given me his manager's phone number. His manager's name is Jose Monavon Jr., and I talked to Jose, and he told me that getting George was going to be problematic, that he was living down in San Diego. He had some girlfriend named Rhonda, and they were in the throes of some hope to die alcohol fucking bender, some leaving Las Vegas shit, is how it was described to me. And he said, you know, my relation with George is kind of strained right now anyway. I can give you his phone number, but I don't think you'll have any luck. So I end up calling George, and his girlfriend picks up, and sure enough, she hangs up on me right when I tell her what I want. So I end up calling Jose back, and I tell him what happened, and he says that he can get George's daughter, Christina Sunshine Jung, who incidentally had never spoken publicly about Blow, about what it was like to be the daughter of Boston George, daughter of Mirtha, goddaughter of Pablo Escobar. I mean, she had a very fascinating story, and she agreed to do it. Jose got her to agree to speak at my event for the first time ever publicly, which was another huge sales point in addition to everything else we had. If you ask anybody now, they'd say that the event was what made everything implode, what made everything fall apart. First, I had to pitch the idea to Max because he was one of the major financiers for the documentary, and I needed him to pay a pretty significant deposit to the Libero Theater, the venue that I wanted to use for the event. I think the deposit was like $5,000. And Zach wanted nothing to do with the event. He told me that. He said, event's one thing that I just don't do. It's a nightmare organizationally, and I just don't think you have enough time to pull it off. It was now the first week of November, and I wanted the event to be on December 5th. And Zach was vehemently against the whole idea. He didn't want to deviate from the project. Basically, funding some of this event through Max was siphoning money out of the film budget. And my whole logic behind it, and the case that I presented to Zach, was that this would potentially keep me out of jail, help start my nonprofit, get public support behind me, and we could use some of the money that we make off the merchandise or off the tiered ticket system, because I was going to sell some of the tickets for $3,000 for the meet and greet, so you could meet some of these famous and interesting people after the show. And then just off general admission, we were going to make a lot. We could have potentially made hundreds of thousands of dollars. At least in my delusional mind, those are the figures that I had come up with. So I started working full force on the event. We were still filming some of the interviews, and Zach would come up occasionally and film B-roll, me getting my hair cut, just different B-roll imagery that he could use later on when he was editing the documentary in post-production. We started arguing about other stuff as well. You know, Zach was pussy whipped on his girlfriend. I mean, for lack of a nicer way to put it. And we'd be going out to very important industry dinners, and he would say that he had to go because his girlfriend was mad at him. And I'd get upset because he was potentially disrupting a career opportunity for us. We were trying to network. We're going out to dinner with different producers and directors and writers, and he would have to go just to appease his girlfriend, and that would piss me off, and we'd get in arguments about it. And I was pretty cruel to him. I can be an asshole when I'm mean to people, and I was being mean to him.
Ooh, my vagina, it burns.
I just didn't want him to squander opportunities that we were creating for ourselves just because he had a girlfriend that didn't like him putting his career before her, even though we were young, hungry, and it really pissed me off that she was getting in the way of such intense ambition that we had. I mean, we really were hustling, and she was becoming very obstructive to the whole process, and it was a source of contention between Zach and I. I began to lose my mind in November of 2017. I got sponsored by a tattoo shop, and they gave me an entire sleeve in one day. and it made me very sick. Sometimes you get ink poisoning when you get too much tattoo work done at once, and we had done like a 10-hour session, maybe longer, maybe 12 hours. We filmed some of it for the documentary, and we took photos that were supposed to be in Inked magazine. After the tattoo session and I got back to Jeff's place, I started complaining because I was getting really nauseous and I started puking. I felt like I'd cotton fever, which was possible because I was injecting so much Suboxone each day. I think I was up to 5 or 6 strips, and it was possible that I had some sort of infection from shooting up, or that I was actually sick from ink poisoning, which was possible too. I don't think I'd ever done a tattoo session quite so long. When I got to the hospital, they ran some tests on me and they determined that I had walking pneumonia, and they actually wanted to admit me to the hospital. I had a huge shoot scheduled for the next day. We were going up to Will De Los Santos' house in the Hollywood Hills, and we were going to interview Mark Boone Jr., one of the stars of Sons of Anarchy, who was a fan of my book. We were also going to interview Sasha Grey, the porn star, and Chris Hanley, producer of American Psycho, who was going to be producing Love in Vain, and it looked like he was going to be jumping on to be the producer for Idiot Savant as well. And then Karina and I were scheduled to go down to Venice Beach to do a photo shoot for Penthouse magazine. So I argued with the doctor at the hospital and I left AMA. I was physically deteriorating. I was losing a lot of weight and I was starting to get very bad insomnia. I think I was just trying to take on way too much. I was trying to launch the nonprofit, so I was getting the website going. I was trying to organize the event. I was trying to juggle all the different press articles that I was being interviewed for, and I was working on the documentary. I felt like I was pushed into a corner and that I may be going away for up to 5 years. I was having my first child, and I'd fucked so many things up in my life. I didn't want to fuck up being a dad. So I figured that I had to exploit myself, and one of the only ways that I could guarantee that there'd be some financial stability is if I agreed to get the documentary done, in addition to all these other projects that I had going simultaneously. I had always looked at social media as kind of just a social experiment. Half the time I'm joking on there. Like, I'll post a lot of my relationship drama. I'll constantly say I'm in a relationship. When I first started dating Karina, I had just gotten married and then we had gotten divorced within a year. And right when Karina and I went Facebook official, I put down that we were engaged just to piss people off. And I just gotten out of prison in 2017. And I was in relatively good shape, so I was posting pictures without my shirt on, and it seemed to piss people off, so it's made me want to do it more. In all the magazine articles, I insisted on being shirtless, and it was kind of an inside joke amongst me and my friends. Paul and I would laugh about it all the time, and Jeff thought it was funny too. It was like I'd become some caricature of this extreme narcissist, and we thought it was just some sort of statement about our current cultural malady. With social media, I hate to say, my generation is fake as fuck. And I think one of the reasons my first book was so successful is because I turned my social media experience into a soap opera. And I think people just wanted to read the book to try to get some insight into my crazy fucking life. I wanted the documentary to be impactful, and I wanted it to be wide-reaching, but I understood that although I had interesting archival footage and I had some well-known people doing interviews about me, I wasn't famous. And so I wanted to manufacture fame, if only to get big enough where I could weaponize that fame and actually stay out of prison and actually be there for my son. So my entire agenda had started to shift. Zach Warren and I had originally talked about and agreed that we would end the documentary with me being in court and getting my sentence read down to me by the judge, and then getting taken away from my pregnant girlfriend and my family and being put in cuffs, because we thought that it supported some of the thematic elements that we wanted to include in the film. There were universal topics: mass incarceration, mental health, addiction, and we thought that this was a very bleak yet poignant and visceral way to close the film. The further I bought into the theatricality of the character that I was playing, this hyper narcissistic monster, the more tyrannical I started being towards my family, towards my friends, towards Karina, and towards Zach. And people stopped wanting to work for me. I started getting the attitude, "Do you know who I am?" type shit, where I'm still a nobody. But I had this inflated sense of ego because it was a character that I was playing, and I just lost complete sense of reality. The buffer that separated fact from fiction began to disintegrate pretty rapidly. My mental health went along with it, and soon I was in thunderous mania, barking orders at Zach Warren, and he was already prone to anxiety attacks. Having a domineering maniac making constant demands scared the shit out of him. Zach kept breaking promises that he was making to other people on my behalf, and it was burning a lot of professional bridges for me. For example, I wanted Tony O'Neill to be the music supervisor for the documentary. Tony O'Neill's my favorite living novelist. He wrote a novel called Sick City that I absolutely fucking worship, and he used to be in the Brian Jonestown Massacre, which has a very incredible cult following. Tony knows all the obscure horror films, and he knows about all sorts of arcane literature. He's like that quiet, introverted, cool manager at a record shop that knows about all the cool shit. That's what Tony O'Neill's been like to me, and we had never met in person, but we had corresponded via email over, I don't know, 5 or 6 year period. He was actually the first respectable writer that endorsed me and gave me a blurb for Wasting Talent. And we had communicated back and forth for several years before we decided to try to collaborate on a novel called Anti-Heroes. And that summer when Karina and I were hanging out in parks all day and squatting in abandoned houses, I was working on the manuscript with him. And I actually had a publishing company that was interested in giving us a deal. Zach broke the promise on the 10 grand, and Tony understandably got upset with me. So he sent me an email, and then I sent him a very melodramatic email. This was just in the start of my manic upswing, and I told him that I had pneumonia and I was being rushed to the hospital. I lied, I was getting rushed to the hospital, and that I might die, and that he was choosing money over friendship. And I just gave him this nonsensical, meandering fucking manifesto about how he was a shitty friend, and I burned the bridge with him. Around that time, I also used the pneumonia to get my primary care physician to write me a note that essentially called for bed rest, that I wasn't to get out of bed, and I was using this as a way to circumvent the drug testing. My ego had inflated to the point where I had the shirt phobia, and I was always wearing sunglasses, and I thought that I was big enough where I could actually start antagonizing my PO. I simply told him that I wasn't going to drug test anymore, not until my pneumonia cleared up, that it could kill me. And he said that I had to drug test. And I said, well, I say that you don't dictate medical advice. You're a probation officer, not a doctor. I was acting completely delusional and idiotic. I actually hung up on my probation officer, somebody that hadn't violated me instantly when I caught a new felony pimping and pandering case, and I was really pushing it to its absolute limit. I told him that my doctor had recommended marijuana, and he said that as long as I had a medical recommendation, that he couldn't do anything about it. So I said, okay. He was a relatively new probation officer, and I knew that he was wrong, that that's not what federal policy is. And he called back later, and he said that he had talked to his supervisor, and actually I wasn't allowed to smoke marijuana while I was on federal probation. And I said, well, you already told me that I could. I actually tape recorded the call. I lied to him and told him that I had done that. And you told me that I could use marijuana. Now I have, and now you're telling me that I can't. So you can't give me a violation if you test me and I come up dirty for marijuana. And I was doing this just to antagonize him on purpose, because I thought I was big enough, and I thought if I caught some sort of press behind it, I was trying to rally against the prison industrial complex and all the tyrants that worked for probation, parole, or any facet of law enforcement. And I was trying to make political statements. I'd become radicalized in my mania. Not only was I trying to manufacture fame, I was trying to create myself as some sort of huge public figure in the tradition of Gandhi or Martin Luther King, somebody who had taken a stand and was going to be celebrated in history books forever because of their contributions to humanity. That's how delusional and far out I got at this point. I was talking to Nick Stahl pretty frequently on the phone at this point, and we were really connecting because we had similar struggles with addiction. We had both lived in southern Florida at one point, and I told him the Mike Virgin story. I actually recorded it on an MP3 and I sent it to him. A lot of people have heard the Mike Virgin story, some of the source material for my novel Wasting Talent. Most people that I've told that story, and I've told it literally hundreds of times when I've been in jails, rehabs, prisons, to some of my friends out here in the free world, they've always told me that it's their favorite story, and Nick told me the same thing. He said it's a really special thing. So I'd showed it to Zach Warren, and he was interviewing Jerry Stahl, which is one of my favorite novelists. He had written Permanent Midnight, and I had helped celebrate the 20th anniversary of that book by doing a reading with him at the Last Bookstore in downtown LA. Zach was going to do an interview with Jerry Stahl, and because they were in communication, he ended up sending him the MP3 of the Mike Virgin story. Jerry Stahl said that he was interested in adapting it into something. Around this time, Gonzo Today magazine had interviewed both Zach and I about the forthcoming documentary. One of the questions they asked is how the project with Jerry Stahl was coming into fruition, because I guess Zach had mentioned it to the journalist that was conducting the interview. And Zach pretty much told the story, how he had sent Jerry the MP3, the Mike Virgin story, and that Jerry was interested in adapting it into something. I started talking to Jose Monavon Jr. a lot on the phone. During this period, when I started losing my mind in November of 2017, I was probably on the phone 14 hours a day. I was constantly either on the phone or working on some of these projects that we were trying to get going, because I knew that it was a ticking time bomb. I was going to go to court and I was about to go to prison. One of the people that I was talking to on a daily basis was Jose Monavon Jr., who used to manage Boston George, and now he's managing Christina Sunshine Young. We'd gotten a deposit, and we were really excited for her to come speak at the event, because it was the first time she had ever spoken publicly about Blow, or what it was like growing up as the daughter of two very infamous drug dealers. Karina and I actually drove up to San Francisco, and we had dinner with Jose and Christina, and we really hit it off. I really loved Christina. I really loved Jose. And I mentioned that I might be interested in writing a sequel to Blow, or at least trying to get the project put together. And they said that it depended on the deal. So I started talking to Wendy, who is also somebody that I was speaking with on a daily basis, and she's a brilliant entertainment attorney. She'd been in the game for a long time. She worked on a lot of A-list projects, and she helped me structure a very complicated deal with Christina and her mom Mirtha, where I was going to help them write a book. Then we were going to put a documentary out and a feature-length film, and I was going to attach a big-name screenwriter to the project. Initially, I was just acquiring their life rights through a letter of intent capacity so that I could use it in press and try to entice prospective financiers into funding the project. Wendy drafted the contract, and their attorney was just waiting to review it. Around that time, we had gone out to a very important industry dinner. I had just signed with the DTLA Entertainment, same company that represented dirtbags like Tom Sizemore and Heidi Fleiss, and they were also representing George Christie, the former leader of the Hells Angels, and that's how I got in contact with them. But I had just signed with that company, so now I had new management. And Zach, Karina, and I had gone out to dinner with my manager, with Wendy Benj, with Jim Oles, and with Wendy's then boyfriend, who's some actor. And it was an important dinner because we were trying to forge and bolster a stronger relationship with Wendy and also with Jim, because he was going to be writing the documentary. And Zach told me that he had to leave because his girlfriend, yet again, was getting pissed off. We got in a big fight in front of everyone at the table. We had kind of walked off, but I was calling him a bitch and how he was pussy whipped. And I was just being mean to him, being an asshole. And he left, and the next morning I called him and I said, "You're fucking fired. I don't want you to be the director on the film anymore because you're putting your girlfriend before the project. And you said that the project always would come first." And he was very emotional on the phone. He was probably having another anxiety attack. He hung up, and I sent him a barrage of very ugly text messages, just being an asshole again. And he eventually blocked me. So I had fired him. My bridge with Tony O'Neill had burned down. Will De Los Santos and I weren't talking. I got in a fight with Wendy, and I told her I didn't want her to have anything to do with the project. And the only people that were still talking to me and I was still in good terms with were Jim Oles and Nick Stahl. I really started to view what I was attempting to do as something grandiose and something altruistic, and I was completely delusional. I just wanted to stay out of prison, and I wanted to be famous, and I wanted to support my son. I really thought that I was an ambassador for prison reform, and I started doing more and more outlandish, attention-seeking behavior. I actually had a graphic design artist make a flyer that said that I would fight any man in the world for $1 million as long as the $1 million went towards the charity of prison reform. I wanted it donated to a nonprofit. And I was really, in my delusional mind, I was willing to get in the ring with anyone. I figured that I would just get knocked out, and then I would get $1 million towards reform. And I didn't think there was a man in the world that wouldn't respect me for jumping in the ring with the heavyweight champion and getting knocked out for my cause. And that was my whole thing. And I was getting radical. And I also made a flyer that said that I essentially demanded a sit down with Donald Trump because I'm the most qualified person in the country to talk about mass incarceration, mental health, and how it correlates with the prison industrial complex, etc., etc. Just delusional shit. And I blasted it all over social media. One day I was eating lunch with Karina, and I got a call on my cell phone. It was my probation officer's supervisor, a guy named Brandon. And this guy was a fucking asshole. He was like one of those balding guys that, you know, some washed up, shot out lady settled for because he's good with the kids. And you know he's the kind of guy that lives for his job. When he's not masturbating to bro chop porn at the office, he spends his days trying to bust people for completely victimless, benign crimes. When cannabis is one of the most effective tools I have to quell the PTSD that, quite frankly, the prison industrial complex helped bolster to begin with. They're disproportionately responsible for a lot of the problems that I had when I got out of prison. So it seems cruel that you can't use a substance that would generally help most people that are getting out of prison with similar psychological issues. Once I started burning all my bridges, that's when the psychosis really kicked in. I started calling out professional boxers on Instagram, calling people like Floyd Mayweather a bitch because he wouldn't fight me for $1 million for charity. I got 3,000 flyers printed for the event, and I also got a 75-foot high billboard printed of myself wearing sunglasses and a suit, just ridiculous shit. And they put it up at the Libero Theater in Santa Barbara, and it all really started going in my head. One day I get a call from Brandon Schneider. He was the head of the federal probation office out of Ventura, and he asked where I was. He said that he had stopped by my parents' house and that I wasn't there, and that they had told him that I wasn't living there, and that he needed to see me immediately. So I told him I was at the doctor's office because I was supposedly still on bed rest for the pneumonia. And I was with Karina. We were eating at some restaurant. I made her jump in the car. We raced over to a doctor's office because he wanted to meet me there. And then he started getting very aggressive with me. And I started filming it with my iPhone. And he said that he thought that I was on drugs and that he felt threatened and that if I scared him too much that he was going to shoot me. He was going to blow my fucking brains out with his gun. He actually made me go drug test in like a Del Taco bathroom, and he told me that if I came up dirty, even for marijuana, which I didn't have time to use fake piss, and I was dirty just for marijuana. He said if I came up dirty for marijuana that I was going back to prison. So I knew that I was going back to prison sooner rather than later, and still in my delusional state I thought that I could beat it. The Santa Barbara Independent, which is the second biggest newspaper in Santa Barbara, had run a pretty long feature-length article about me. My picture was in it, my name was on the cover, and the big billboard was up of me at the Libero, plus there were 3,000 flyers about the event circulating Santa Barbara, and I think people started to recognize me. It may have been just in my mind, but I remember clearly going to one of my tattoo appointments for my tattoo sponsor. It's located right next to Santa Barbara High School. All the kids were getting out for lunch, so there's probably 150 kids crossing the street right by the tattoo shop, and they saw me. And the kids circled around me, and they asked me if I wanted to smoke a bowl, if I wanted to drink a beer. Some of them took out their cell phone and started taking pictures of me, and it was like the first moment in my life that I actually experienced a little glimpse of fame, and it scared the shit out of me. We went up to Santa Cruz for Thanksgiving. Now, I hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days because of a confluence of factors. The impending prison sentence, trying to get all the stuff coordinated for the event, the different bridges that I had burned. It was all weighing on me. I wasn't sleeping. I was stressed out. My dad suggested that we take my rental minivan up to Santa Cruz, and he drove. I sat in the back. We went up there. We had a relatively nice time. I remember I was smoking a lot of weed, just trying to calm down. And my extended family was there, my aunts, uncles, cousins. And I was in the throes of mania, telling them about all the projects that I had going, that I was about to be a household name, showing them all the recent press articles that have been written about me. I had been working on the Blow 2 deal, and I got the text message on Thanksgiving night that they were going to move forward with it, that we were going to get the life rights relinquished from Time Warner, and that I was basically going to own the intellectual property for Blow 2. This was a huge deal for me, but my extended family didn't seem very impressed. They didn't even know what the original Blow was. I mean, none of these were drug people. They're all kind of square. And Karina and my parents were so annoyed with me and the egomania that was occurring that they didn't give me the praise that I thought that I deserved for pulling off such a big deal. And it set the tone for the rest of the night. I was in a bad mood. So we left probably around 10, 11 at night, and my dad was driving. He wasn't driving very well, and we started arguing. I told him that I wanted to drive, and he didn't want me to drive because I hadn't slept for so long, and I'd been smoking herb for the last 4 or 5 hours. And I demanded that he pull over. He actually pulled over on the median on the wrong side of the freeway. And then finally he pulled off. We were in Watsonville, California, which is a pretty ghetto part of Northern California. It's straight norteño territory. And we pulled into some dirt parking lot in some 24-hour convenience store. And we got in one of the worst fights that I've ever gotten in with my parents in my entire life. Started screaming at them, telling them that they were never supportive of me, that they didn't believe in me. They looked at my career as a joke. And I told Karina that she needed to get out of the car and come with me, that I didn't want to drive back to Santa Barbara with them. And Karina looked at me like I was crazy. She said, "What are we going to do? It's midnight. We're in Watsonville in the middle of nowhere." And I said that we'd take an Uber, which would have been $1,000. Karina refused to go with me, and I told her that she was betraying me and that I would never forgive her for this. At the time, I was working on my second novel, June Gloom, and I had it on my laptop. So I grabbed it and I walked away. While they were pleading with me to come back, I had my laptop. It had one of those coiling cords coming out of it. And I was wearing a wife beater and I was wearing slacks. Now, I'd just gotten a new sleeve done. I think I had spiked hair at the time. I looked like a straight peckerwood, and I was in a ghetto area. I made a left, went down a dark street, and I must have looked like a crackhead that was clucking a laptop, because here I am with the wife beater on. I have this laptop, the cord's coiling out of it, and an Eldorado pulls up. There's about 4 Hispanics in it. They all have shaved heads, tattoos on their face, definitely norteños. They roll their window down, they look at me, and they say, "Hey, what's up, homie?" Now, the chances that they have guns on them is extremely high. And I don't have any backup of June Gloom, my novel, on my laptop. I don't care about the laptop, but there's no fucking way I'm giving my novel up. So I had to make a split-second decision, and I look at them and I say, "I'm with law enforcement, homie." I could see one of them sneering, and they kind of just looked at me. I don't know if they knew to take me seriously or not. So I started running towards them full speed. I just took the gamble. I knew that I had to do something drastic. And I started talking into my wife beater, saying, "4 Hispanic males, El Dorado." And they're not buying it. They're not moving. And then all of a sudden, the car peels off. Somebody probably said, "What if he is a cop?" But I knew damn well that they were probably going to come back with 15 more of them, and they were going to fucking kill me. So I start running down the street, and I'm not going to call my parents or Karina. I'm still very upset with them. So I call my little cousin. She picks up, and I say, "Norteños are trying to kill me. You have to come get me." And she's like, "What the fuck are norteños?" She's square. She doesn't know what norteños are. And I explain that gangbangers are trying to murder me. And she's like, "Where are you?" "I'm in Watsonville." And she's like, "Where are your parents?" I don't have time for this. So I just hang up on her. Eventually, I walk back to the liquor store because I feel like at least it's a safer area. And my parents are still there with Karina. And they talk me into just getting into the minivan and going home. Man, I do. Things started to go downhill very quickly after that. I needed to find an A-list screenwriter to write the screenplay for the sequel to Blow, and I reached out to Jerry Stahl. He had written Bad Boys 2, he had written episodes of Twin Peaks. He's a writer that I really respected. And he had said that I needed to send an offer to his agent, and he gave me his agent's email address. Then he sent me another email back, and he was upset because there was a miscommunication that he said I was already telling people that we were working together, because Zach Warren had mentioned in Gonzo Today when we did the interview that Jerry Stahl was going to be adapting my Mike Virgin story. So it was a miscommunication, and because I was having such a bad psychosis breakdown, I sent him a really nasty email back, and I burnt that bridge. Someone that had been kind of a mentor to me for the last 3 or 4 years and had helped me very generously in my career. Around that same time, I leaked the video of my probation officer threatening to murder me. Obviously, this pissed him off. He called me. We had a very confrontational phone call, and he basically said he was going to violate me. I hung up on him. And the next day, I went to a Kings hockey game with my dad and with Karina. We were trying to make up for what had happened over Thanksgiving. While we were on the way down to the game in Los Angeles, I checked my email and I noticed that in the sent email, somebody had forwarded the very scathing email that I'd sent Tony O'Neill to Jerry Stahl. And it wasn't me. Obviously, I wasn't going to send that to him. We were already in the middle of a falling out. And it was just to make me look crazier than I already was. So I knew that somebody had hacked into my email. I was getting increasingly paranoid, and I didn't know what was going on. I'd probably been up for 5 or 6 days now. I knew that somebody had hacked into my email account, and when I logged into Gmail, I had checked to see where the location was, and it happened in Los Angeles, so I assumed that it was Zach Warren, still pissed off that I had fired him from being the director of the documentary. He had also called Max Peretz, one of the financiers for the documentary. I think he was pissed that we were going to go on without him being the director, and he told Max that I was on drugs. And my erratic behavior definitely made Max feel that I was. And what he did is he pulled out the deposit on the Libero event. So now the event wasn't even going to happen. I was scrambling to try to make it happen. There were already people flying in from all over the country to attend the event. I already had paid a lot of the deposits for the different celebrity figures to come speak at it. We had already paid for the flyers, the poster, all the promotional material. So it was a big deal that it wasn't going to happen now. And it was going to make me look really bad. I went out to smoke a cigarette at Jeff's condo, and I saw this old Buick pull up, and there were these 2 guys wearing suits, and they had a camera. They looked like federal agents. They stopped, and they started taking pictures of me. Now, I had been up for so long, I could not discern between reality and hallucinatory psychosis. But it scared me, because I assumed that my PO was trying to murder me. So I called the FBI. And I had a 2-hour-long ranting phone call with them, which I recorded because at this point I was recording all of my phone calls. I was so paranoid that the government was trying to kill me or that I was going to get taken out that I wanted everything to be documented. The FBI listened to me. I know they weren't taking me seriously. They probably assumed that I was just having some sort of mental health crisis. And that very same day, I felt compelled to look through Karina's cell phone because she was acting weird, and I found messages where she was communicating with Zach, telling him that I was crazy. She was talking to guys on Facebook, even though I don't know if it was true or not. I was just, like I said, I was in psychosis, and I thought feds were after me. And the MP3 recording that I had done of the FBI call, I sent to every single person in my contact list, all my ex-girlfriends, all my friends, all my professional contacts. And I decided to go on Facebook Live because I knew that I was going to prison. My PO had called me and he said that he was going to violate me, that my behavior was absolutely out of control at this point. So I did a Facebook Live and I basically explained to the entire world what had happened. I explained my side of the story, the pimping and pandering, and that I was probably going to prison and that I thought the government was trying to kill me. This made me look like an absolute fucking lunatic. I was getting hundreds of messages on my Facebook from people asking if I was okay. And Karina had left because she thought I was crazy because I accused her of cheating on me. I got in a fist fight with Jeff because I thought he stole a meatball sandwich from me. And then I started thinking that the fact that I called the FBI, that maybe they were going to come try to take me out. So I actually called the governor's office and tried to ask the governor for protection against the FBI and my PO. I was losing my fucking mind. Now, I had 2 friends fly out from Michigan, and police had showed up at Jeff's condo because somebody had called and said that I was trying to kill myself, and I was too scared to stay there. These 2 guys from Michigan, one of them I had done time with when I was in the feds in Wisconsin, they were on their way out there, and they said that they would protect me once I got there, and I just had to hang in there. But I didn't feel safe at Jeff's condo anymore. So I had walked up to the local news channel, and I tried to explain to them that I was a best-selling author, that I'd just been in the newspaper, and that the feds and the government was after me and trying to kill me because I was an ambassador for prison reform. And the news channel just said that they would get back to me. I don't think they wanted anything to do with me because I sounded like a lunatic. Finally, I was walking down the street and I saw a helicopter hovering above me. I got on Facebook Live and I started telling everyone that a helicopter was following me and that this was absolute proof that the government was trying to take me out. And now people really thought I was crazy. I shattered my cell phone because I thought that they were tracking me that way. I finally showed up back at Jeff's house. He was long gone at this point. After we got in the fist fight, he had taken off. Karina was gone. My friends from Michigan finally showed up, and they saw what state I was in, that I was scared, and they thought there might be some validity to it because I tried to explain everything that was going on. From my PO to my email getting hacked into, I felt that there were some outside forces trying to take me down. And they told me that we should go get an Airbnb down in Malibu and we should party in LA for the weekend. And I said, yeah, let's go. I just needed to get some peace of mind now that the event wasn't going to happen. And I went to my drawer. I was prescribed Xanax at this point, and I was also on Suboxone. My medication was missing. Now, I already knew that the only people that would come into Jeff's condo and take my medication were my parents, because they were being neurotic and they probably thought that I was going to hurt myself with my prescribed medication. I called them, and they said that they had in fact taken it and that they didn't feel safe with me having bottles of medication. I said, listen, I'm 32 years old. You don't have the legal authority to take my medication. I'm coming up to the house to get it. Now, my two friends from Michigan were vehemently against this. They said that it was a bad idea to go up there, but I told them that I was going to have withdrawal symptoms if I didn't have my Suboxone, I didn't have my Xanax. So I convinced them to take me up there. I didn't have a cell phone anymore because I had shattered it, but they had given me a GoPro because I said that I had to have some sort of documentation of this just in case something bad went down. So I had the GoPro. I walked up to my parents' front door. I knocked on it, and my parents talked to me from the other side of the door. And they told me that they would only give me one Xanax and one Suboxone. And we got in a pretty big fight about it. And I said, okay, I'm going to have no choice but to call 911. So I called 911, and I was very clear. I said, listen, I'm not trying to press charges against my parents, but I'm 32 years old. They confiscated prescribed medication, and I need my medication. Police said that they would come and they would help me, and that they were on their way just to sit tight. They finally showed up, and I was very relieved to see the police because I wanted to get my medication and just go down to LA, get this all behind me. As soon as the car pulled up, cops jumped out, they drew guns on me, and they told me to get on the ground. And I said, what do you mean? I called you. They said, get on the ground. So I got on the ground, they cuffed me, and I said, what's going on? I started screaming, I had the GoPro out, started calling for my parents. How could you do this to me? You set me up. Police told me that I had a federal warrant for my arrest. My PO had put out a warrant for me, and I was going to jail, and there was nothing that I could do about it. I sat cuffed in the back of the cop car, and we started heading to the Santa Barbara County Jail. And it was one of the lowest moments in my entire life. I had failed. I had tried as hard as I could to manufacture fame, to try to get some financial stability, to try to stay out of prison so that I wouldn't have to miss the birth of my son. But somehow, in the midst of all the chaos, I'd lost the most important thing of all, my sanity. And I didn't know when I was going to come home again, and I didn't know what the future was going to hold. But the nightmare that I was living was honestly just beginning. But that's a story for an entirely different time. Palabra.
Please enter your password, then press pound. You have 1 new voice message. You have 13 saved voice messages. First voice message.
Freaking disgusting. Just a plot thing just on the ground. Ryan. Hey, it's Paul. Sorry I didn't call you back after lunch with my mom. I was totally out of it. I'd been sleeping an hour and a half the last few nights, and then I just crashed. And, no dope. No, I'm not doing dope. Just fucking crashed, and like how I do, And I had one of these normal dreams that I get all the time, that where I'm doing drugs, or no, I'm trying to do the drugs, like always. It's different. It's crack, it's heroin, it's meth, it's fucking everything, dude. Any kind of fucking drug. And like, my parents are always like, what is that? Like, and I'm trying to put like blocks of meth, like, into a bag and, get into a car with my friends outside. And like, they're coming in and like acting all tweaked out. And I'm like, God damn it, they're fucking tweaked out. And they're gonna expose me. And, I'm like, they're, diamonds. And my mom's like, really? Well, Mom, it's like, it doesn't, and my dad's all suspicious and shit, like he always is, or used to be. And anyway, the point is that I never get to do the damn drugs, dude. I'm always like about to hit the crack and then fucking lighter to the crack. You hear the sound, oh God, I'm gonna come. And then wake up. Every time. Every fucking time. And I know you've had those dreams where you get to actually do the drug, and then you wake up and you kind of feel high. And it's your brain like tricking you, and it's fucking awesome. And I never goddamn get that. And thank you for letting me vent on your stupid voicemail. You probably won't listen to it. You fucking never call me. You're a dumb motherfucker. Fucking faggot. I'll bend you over and just look at your butt. And then call you a fucking fag and run. Run for the hills. Anyway, so, call me. You're never gonna listen to this anyway, so it doesn't fucking matter. I can say whatever I want. Ryan is a bitch. He's a big fat bitch. Okay, later, bro. Brother.
Hey, this message is for Ryan Leone. This is Nick Stahl. Hey, man. Yeah, I've been seeing you pop up in a couple magazine articles that I've read, and I'm hearing you tell people we're close friends or something. I don't know. I don't know if I'm mistaken or what, but I just can't seem to, remember who you are. In fact, I really don't think we've ever met before in my life. I saw a couple pictures on social media, and I mean, they have to be photoshopped. I mean, it's a good job. I mean, it's good Photoshop. It's so good, I'm not even mad, really. I guess if this helps you, keep doing what you're doing, it helps your career or something, go for it. But and don't mind the fact that I'm calling from a block number. It's got nothing to do, with you personally. And
hey, Ryan, it's Boston George. You think you're all about something, don't you, kid? Because you got caught with a half pound of pot. Fucking embarrassing. A half pound. Do you realize who I am? I'm George Young.
Hey, Ryan, this is Tommy Chong, man. Just listen to the new album, man. Fantastic stuff. Sex, riots, pocket buttholes, crazy war stories, man. Drug stories for truckers. Fucking Pablo brother, man. Fucking Pablo brother, man. Talk soon. Okay, bye.
Hey, Ryan, it's me, Dirt Nasty. You fucked my girlfriend, bro. That's not all right. Seriously, bro, what the fuck? I was so cool. I gave you all those fun party drugs, and you fucked my girl, dude. Fucked up, bro. I'm gonna come talk to you later, bro. Fuck you.
Hey, Ryan, what up? This Rick Ross, man. Just wanted to give you a shout out. Let you know we got your back. Keep doing your thing. All the players rise.
All right. Listen, Ryan. Well, do care, man. Listen. I'm undercover, man, and I'm going to need some of your assistance. Listen to this. You hear that? That's the sound of running water. It helps to evade people, monitoring calls and such. You can create a kind of a white fizzy foam if you fuck with it. I don't know. Anyway, listen, man. I was at the dentist today. Don't tell anyone. I've been psyching them out. I'm worried about something. I found, shit, you've got to look into this, man. You may have it. It's called the hairy black tongue disease. And, at this point, I would say it's the last thing you fucking need. Goddamn, you'd have to have shears and an unbreakable comb at all times. I wanted to wish you well on your adventure into the field of economics. Was it economics? No. What the fuck was it? Oh, shit. You're writing. Yeah. Well, good luck, man. There's nothing worse. Yeah. Try and keep it together. Avoid the hairy black tongue at all fucking costs, man. Yeah. Raise ipsa loquitur, man. Buy the ticket. Take the fucking ride. All right. I'm going to hide in another section of this toilet. Good night, man. Godspeed.
Yes, Ryan, this is Morgan Freeman. I'm a huge fan. I really loved wasting talent. And well, I too am a sex riot survivor. I was in the infamous Congo blowout, Shawshank State Penitentiary in the fall of 1948. Of course, it kicked off when Eddie Dufresne tried methamphetamine pills for the first time. Anyhow, we don't know each other, but I was calling about Tom. Tom has been sending me postcards from prison every day for more than 30 years. They simply say, I may know you. And finally, he sent a letter that said, I may know Ryan Leone, too. Do you know Tom? I worked with him once as a stagehand, long time ago. It was a tiny little town called Benton, about 10 miles west of Wichita. I may not know much, but I know that Tom is a bigger weirdo than even you. Alabra, alabra, alabra.